Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. And should I say, well, thank you for allowing us to come into your space. This might be a day off for a lot of people, so you're at home and maybe you're still with family. Whatever the case may be, we really appreciate you. My name is Nate the Barbarian. Welcome back to Hot Mic. Hot Mic is a podcast where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. And we'll be doing the same thing today. I am not alone as always. You can see on the screen there joined by a really good crew of people with strong opinions. We've got Raven Mundy with us today, Phil Heimlich, Kevin Gordon, and Kevin Aldridge. So let me just bring the screen up so we can see everybody. Hello. Happy day after Thanksgiving Day to
Happy
everyone.
Black Friday, everyone.
Happy Black Friday. There it is. You said black. I'm like, whoa, what is what is he about to say? Good to see everybody. You guys ready for this?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
I'll take a moment from my shopping spree today to get all the bargains and stuff and take some time with you all today.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to take no time off on you. Like I told you, man, I'm still mad at you and all of MAGA for what's about to happen to the country. And I'm not going to let you forget that, Kevin. Just remember
Good,
that.
good. I'm not going to let you forget all the successes too.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
Okay.
I can't wait for the successes. We'll talk about one of those successes with Mexico already. It's like magic, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that. So
Trudeau.
just
Yeah.
let's start with some local topics. There's a lot of stuff happening locally that may or may not be on people's radar screen. And we really could start with any of these topics, but I want to start with the fact that the Cincinnati Police Union, the Fraternal Order of Police, the FOP, is asking for a policy change as it relates to high speed chases. So the way it works right now, Cincinnati Police cannot engage in a high speed chase if somebody is accused of just stealing a car. It's got to be something violent, something imminent. It can be someone stole maybe a gun from a gun store. They can chase somebody. And the FOP president is saying that he feels frustrated. He's saying that police officers feels frustrated because they want to go out, they want to go after and chase these individuals and apprehend them. And I want to get your thoughts on that. Should the city change its use? It's not its use, but its pursuit policy. Anybody want to jump in there first?
Well, I want to clarify one thing in the
Sure.
story that you mentioned or the story that was provided. There is a line in there that said, under current CPD policy, Cobra says police can only chase suspects of a violent felony. That does not include stolen cars, like you mentioned,
Right.
or suspects who hit a pedestrian or rob a gun store. So if it said that, well, it's got to be a violent felony. So I'm hitting a pedestrian or robbing a gun store apparently is not one of the ones that they can pursue.
No, that is what they can pursue.
Well, it says they can't.
Yeah,
Does not.
I think I think the policy states that it does have to be of a felony nature in order for them to engage in
I thought it said
a
And
pursuit.
violent felony.
it has to be a violent felony. Yes.
And it says, according to the article, that does not include stolen cars or suspects who hit a pedestrian or rob a gun store.
Yeah, I read that differently. I thought that those were caveats that they could pursue. If somebody hits a pedestrian, they can pursue. If somebody is accused of robbing a gun store, they can pursue. I would go back and read that again, Kevin.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Oh, anybody want to jump? Well, let me go first. No, they should not change the use of force policy. All it's going to do is put more people in jeopardy. We've got to think about public safety, and there's a contradiction within his own words of the president of FOP. On one hand, he says, "Look, we're handcuffed, and these guys are committing these crimes because they know we can't apprehend them." But then he also admits that they recently apprehended four youth for allegedly stealing a car. So you can't have it both ways. And it's
Well,
not
that was after an accident. That was after they
Nathan,
changed it.
for some reason I was cut off and didn't hear the introduction. Would you mind giving a 20, 30-second explanation? Because for some reason I didn't hear it.
yeah, it's not a problem. So the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, is asking for a policy change. Basically, they want to be able to chase after people who have stolen cars. That's currently prohibited by Cincinnati pursuit policy. I'm saying absolutely no. All it's
So
going to
what
do
is the
potentially.
current? Remind me, what's the current pursuit policy? What's the change, in other words?
Purpose policy is they can pursue someone if they have allegedly robbed a gun store and or they have hit a pedestrian. They currently cannot pursue someone who is alleged to have just stolen a car.
I'm assuming the pursuit is not limited to those two areas you mentioned. If somebody shoots somebody, I assume that
Yes.
Yeah,
they can
yeah,
pursue.
yeah.
So you're not. You need to clarify a little what the current policy is. It's obviously more than
Violent
just
felony. It's got to be a violent felony,
okay. And,
alleged.
and they want to lower the threshold. So if somebody steals a car, they can chase them.
Exactly.
And why wouldn't, especially if it's your car, why wouldn't you want them to be permitted to chase the guy or woman?
Because people might get killed and hurt, seriously harmed, like what happened back in 2020, which led to this policy change.
What are you referring to in 2020?
There was a police pursuit that led to two elderly people losing their lives. The daughter filed a lawsuit, and as a part of it, CPD agreed to change their policy to what it is now.
So here's what I think about that, Nathan. I think that I think the policy as it sits right now is a good policy. And I think that here's why I think lowering the threshold is dangerous. And I think this is true in a lot of ways in which we look at how police should respond to certain types of incidents. I think that property crimes, which a stolen car would fall into that category, is what is worth risking, public safety, human lives over. A lot of these situations where you see these stolen cars, many of them, because I've talked to some police officers, are people who leave their car running and get out and, run into UDF or run into someplace in a public space, and, somebody will jump in their car and take it, which, by the way, most people probably don't realize it, but even that is, I think, a violation of law, that you're not really supposed to do that. Get out of your car and leave it running in a public space. And when you think about, most of us who own cars have insurance. We have protections against theft and loss of stolen property. Certainly, if it's our car, we all want it back. But I think any of us, if asked, would we want our car back at the expense of risking other people's lives? I don't think any of us would say that that's a trade-off that we would be willing to make, that we can get
Okay, so
another car.
what deterrent
Wait, let me
deterrent
finish
is
this.
there? Is somebody stealing a car? What's the deterrent if they
No,
know
the,
they
well,
can,
the, well, the
nobody's gonna
deterrent,
chase
the deterrent is that eventually police may or may not track you down and arrest you for that.
But the
We've seen
only
in-
way they're going to
Wait,
track
wait,
it,
let me
Kevin,
finish,
the only way
Phil.
they're
I'm
going to
gonna
track
give
them
you your
down is
chance.
by
Let me
seeing them
finish
on
my
the freeway.
point. Let me finish my point, Phil, so that you can
Okay,
respond
all
to everything
Okay.
that I'm
All
going
right.
to say instead of in peace. Okay.
Okay, all right.
Um,
Okay.
in many of these cases, and we've seen in some cases, police are familiar with who the individuals in cases are, and they're able to circle back around and arrest these folks. I'm not saying that we should create an environment where thieves feel emboldened, but I'm also saying that I am against police over exerting their authority in situations where you're talking about crimes against property that don't require you putting the public safety at risk. Tasing, I've said this when I've seen officers tase young kids for stealing a candy bar in the store. I think that's over the top police work. Should a child be held accountable for stealing from a store? Absolutely. But is tasing a 13 or 14-year-old kid for stealing a candy bar, is the punishment commensurate with the crime?
Okay, let
And
me
so
ask you a question.
so I think that the way that you look at this situation is that, does the risk outweigh the situation? And I think in some
Okay.
cases it does. And that's where I think
man, let
that
me-
where they have the policy now makes a certain degree of sense.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Somebody steals a car from that situation you said, and a thing goes out on the police radio, or it could be 3 days later, but they know there's a certain car in a certain place been stolen. So a cop sees that car, whether it's on the freeway or out, and knows this is the stolen car. And you're saying can't do anything. Can't do anything.
No,
'cause they
not
can't
saying
chase
that.
them.
Not saying that. What I'm saying is that if the police officer initiates a stop and the guy decides to floor it and take off, you don't exacerbate that pursuit by pursuing that individual if you know it to
But
be
what's
a
the difference
if you
in
know
what I
it's
just
shown to
said?
be
What
a
I just
stolen
said,
car.
same thing.
Now, a lot of that depends on the situation. If I'm driving 75 miles an hour in the middle of rush hour in downtown Cincinnati, I don't think that that's a wise judgment by a police officer for a stolen car. I just don't feel. I don't. I don't think
But
that. I don't think
but
the risk of that is worth it.
you're giving us these scenarios that isn't relevant, such as tasing a 13-year-old or 75 miles an hour in a whatever a busy
But
area.
this is what we're
As a
talking
general
about:
rule,
risk of
no,
public
just let me
safety.
be
Phil,
clear. As a
that's what we're
general
talking
rule,
about.
okay, but I want to be clear about something you're saying. Make sure I understand. You are saying that if a car is stolen and the police, all the cops have this on their whatever computer, whatever, and if a cop is behind that car and sees that car knowing it's stolen, are you saying they can't do anything? Yes or no?
No, I'm not saying that they shouldn't do anything. I'm saying they should
Well,
attempt to pull
anything
that.
meaning
I'm saying
pursue the
they should
car. You're
attempt to
saying if they
stop
can't
that.
pursue,
They should attempt to stop that individual. And if that individual decides that they are going to flee at a
yeah,
high rate of speed, I think
yeah.
that officer has an obligation to determine in that situation what is the risk and exposure to the public. Again, there's a lot of information that you got to look at in these situations.
Well,
And
okay,
if
but this change in policy, if I understand the change in policy, if they determine, yes, I'm going to chase this guy, I think it's in the public interest for me to do that. This policy would prevent that, right? Because it's just a property theft.
Well, okay, let me jump in here a second. First of all, I got to say I mostly agree with what Kevin says. But the one area that I really wish people would stop saying is that we have cars or we have this and it's covered by insurance.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
The fact that insurance, we all pay the price for that because somebody shoplifts or because cars are stolen, because cars are damaged, and the insurance company has to pay for that. You pay for it, I pay for it, everybody pays for it, and the risk is spread. So the idea that, oh, it's covered by insurance, I think we need to stop saying that and saying, yes, this is a crime that should be punished and all this, or we shouldn't fall back on insurance. But as far as the pursuit end of this, I know that when you pull up, if a cop pulls up behind somebody and they floor it, yes, that is a threat to public safety. We had, I think, 2 years ago or so, a car that was pursued from over in Ohio, came over into Kentucky, came down 4th Street in Covington and then into Newport, crashed into a restaurant and killed a few people, 3 or 4 people. Okay, so yes, there is a danger to society. But I think and what's weird, and what I would encourage everybody to do, and Phil in particular, when Nathan takes the time to send us these articles that we're going to talk about, how about familiarizing yourself with the articles so that you have something to talk about so we don't have to rehash that. But as far as this article,
No, just so you know what I was saying, I didn't verbally hear his introduction for some reason on my computer. It wasn't, I read everything and I do read everything.
Okay. So when you have this situation and what's laid out in here, I mean, it was the undercover cop pulled up behind this car, and I'm guessing they tried to pull it over. They went into this high-speed chase, and then there was what is it? Anyway, there was a T-bone, and that's when they caught the kids. Now, I would think that if a cop pulls up behind a car and recognizes that it's stolen, just say, hey, to all the other cops that are in the area, I'm going to back off following this guy, but I would like something of where these rolling roadblocks happen. You could have a cop pass somebody, pull in front of them, and then a cop pull up behind them and block them in. There's other things that can be done in order to do this. But the high-speed chase, yes, Kevin, I agree. There should not be these high-speed chases over a stolen car. Now, where in some of these instances, they mention that they know where the people live, they know where they hang out, they know what they do. Well, do the job and get them there, as opposed to chasing somebody through some of these neighborhoods. So,
Hey, Raven, what's your thoughts?
Just was kind of, taking in everybody's opinions, but two things. First, I want us to think about the mechanics of what a police pursuit looks like. I would say majority of the time they don't end pretty. Like the car don't just stop and then let the cop take him out the car and arrest him. Typically it ends in a very dangerous situation where either the car is, kind of gently veered off the road some way, which could be dangerous, or it crashes into a business or some public space where people are occupying that space. Like a police pursuit, I feel like majority of the time does not end well. And so you have to, that's something like, and I know you don't like this field, but Kevin had a point. When you are policing, you have to think about how your actions affect everybody involved, no matter what you're doing, whether you are tasing somebody, whether you are shooting somebody, or whether you are pursuing them in a car. And so you have to be mindful of that when you're deciding this person stole a car. This is not a missing persons case where the person that I'm looking for might be in the trunk of that car, or, it's not that serious over stolen property. And so you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about something like this. Also, on the other end,
sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Raven. I was going to say, would you agree that if it becomes known among the public,
Absolutely,
that
criminals know the law better than anybody else?
No, just a second. My question is, if it becomes known that that the cops are not going to chase people who steal cars, don't you think that's going to have an impact on people who steal cars? In fact, aren't they going to have an incentive if a cop starts to follow them to hit the gas and head off, because they know if they do that, the cop can't follow them.
They do that anyway, Phil. They do that anyway, Phil. That's the thing that you're missing here is a lot of times, and I'll give you a perfect example. I have a friend who used to be on the Cincinnati police force, and this is how these things work. And he talked about a high-speed pursuit that he got into at one point in time where it was simply a guy who was driving without a license, which is just a ticket. All he was going to get was a ticket and be told, hey, you got to have somebody else come get this car. Soon as he pulled up,
which is not a felony, correct?
Right, exactly. But as soon this predates the current policy that's in place, okay. By the way, the story I'm telling. And so the guy floors it. He pulls up behind him, he floors it. Now, mind you, he's got his 13-year-old sister in the passenger seat with him, the guy that's in this car. He takes off, he pursues him for a couple of blocks. The guy winds up T-boning somebody else in another car several blocks down the road. Fortunately, the person he T-boned suffered minor injuries. The guy's sister, who was 13, who was in the passenger seat with him,
the bad guy, the guy who had the
bad guy. Yeah. His sister suffered a broken pelvis, a broken foot, some other things. He climbs over his sister in the passenger seat to get out of the car and leaves her behind and runs. And this is all over a guy who didn't have a license.
So but that's a misdemeanor. It has nothing to do with this policy change. It's a misdemeanor.
No. It's not about the policy. It's about the point, Phil. It's about the point of bad guys run regardless. Like that's the thing. Bad guys run. People who violate the law, who see the police, they're going to punch it, regardless of whether or not the police.
Not necessarily.
I'm telling you, Phil. Talk to the cops.
I would argue that if you're being chased, you're going to run even faster.
The opinion that I'm putting forth here is not what Kevin Aldridge thinks. This is talking to police officers who do this job every day, which I think is an important piece to add in here. This is not my speculation, my conjecture. These are experiences that police officers have said happen. And to Raven's point, the reality is these high-speed pursuits almost always end one way or another in a crashed vehicle and people getting hurt in one way or another. And those are just the facts.
Can I add something? This is a clip from an online news source here locally, and it's allegedly a quote from President Ken Kober. and he says the teens took off running. Police made four arrests and said these teens are known to them for stealing cars. But then he also says that this is an example of why officers should be able to chase these cars. And so what I'm saying is the argument that, well, we just let them run away and we are allowing criminals to get away with it just isn't true. These individuals get caught anyway, in most cases, eventually. So for again, it just goes back to the original point.
Other than being pulled over. According to Kevin Aldridge, they take off every time. So, excuse me, how do they get
because
caught?
Police apprehend them later. Like they did in the most recent case.
Under what circumstance do they apprehend him?
I don't know the circumstances. All I know is that the police said that they arrested the 4 individuals that they weren't allowed to chase. So they weren't allowed to chase them, but they caught them anyway. So to me, that just blows the argument that you're just allowing criminals to do what they want to do out of the water. That is just not true.
I don't know how you can arrest these guys other than stopping them, unless they find it. How do you arrest them other than stopping them in the car?
Why is that the assumption that that's how you make the arrest? If you suspect somebody of a crime, you can arrest them. So if you come across this person who is known, because this is a statement from the article, police made these 4 arrests, and these teens are known for stealing cars and stealing guns. If you have enough suspicion as an officer to make an arrest based on evidence or whatever you have, and you can confidently say we know these children for stealing these things, you can make that arrest.
Let's say you don't know where they live. I mean, you're saying children.
In most cases, you're dealing with the same criminal element.
Yeah.
The police know these individuals. They're familiar with them. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say we know who they are and where they are, but yet
we don't know where to get them.
Yeah. We have to chase them and put public safety in risk. You can't have it both ways. I would take it a step further. Not only should police that they not change the policy, what they need to do is to put some real teeth behind it. Whereas if police violate it, they need to deal with criminal charges. How many people agree with that?
No, I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
I do
but
too.
the thing that
I'm surprised.
Really? Because a job of a police officer is tough enough. You don't have to be second.
So you can do whatever you want to do without
24/7. No, you're not doing anything you want. You have certain confines in which you operate. And I think to a certain extent, some of these things are judgment calls that a police officer has to make in a split-second decision. Now, one of the things that I find kind of contradictory in that statement you just put up, Nathan, is that these teens were known to the police officers. I mean, I try to pay attention I pay attention when I'm behind the wheel. But I have heard certain statements from cops that say, well, we see this, we see that. And as I'm driving down the road and I'm 35 miles an hour and I look over to the people oncoming traffic, I couldn't tell you what that person looked like. Sometimes I can't tell you what that car looks like. When I'm up next to somebody, I don't know if how do these cops know who these kids are in this car to begin with? I don't know that they know that. The only way that they would know that this car was stolen is to roll up behind it, run the license plate, and know that it's stolen. At that point, there is no danger to the public. You mean to tell me that there are not enough cops on the street where this guy says, hey, I see this car, I'm going to back off, I'm going to be 3, 4, 5 cars behind that, but hey, up at this intersection, I would like you to, come up and then pull in front of this car, and I'll pull up behind him. They block him in. Boom. No chase, no nothing done. Why does it have to be one car chasing one car? Couldn't there be something where they follow it, that they get other cops involved so that they can't flee? I mean, to me, that would be the easiest answer.
Sure. And here's what I think, too. Let's not misconstrue not engaging in a high-speed chase with allowing criminals to get away with something. Okay. I think that's a fallacy of an argument in this case, in that, yes, you continue to try to do police work, investigative work to bring people to justice. But I think the conversation here is the risk reward and public safety. You can't get away from that. Police's primary job is to protect and serve. And if putting more people in danger by pursuing suspects who, particularly if they've committed misdemeanor crimes or property crimes, I can't sit here and say that anybody would say that a car is worth 2 or 3 human lives. Phil, you wouldn't say that. Kevin, you wouldn't say that. Raven, you wouldn't say that. Nathan, you wouldn't say that. So if you wouldn't say that reobtaining a stolen car is worth a life, then you have to back off this notion that it's worth putting the public safety at risk to chase down bad guys who've committed property crimes. There are other ways to go about apprehending folks that
somebody in one of our listeners in the chat just said, which I think is a good point. What if they leave town? Well, guess what? If they leave town, okay. Yeah. Under this philosophy, the cop could have followed them, but the cop said,
so what?
We're not allowed. Just a second. We're not allowed to pursue. Okay, they can't do anything. The guy leaves town. What do? They call the cops. I mean, they don't even know where the guy went. Because
Phil, in your mind, problem. Answer this question, then, Phil. Answer this question, Phil. Where is the line in pursuit, and what's worth putting the public at risk for? So since you want to argue this, what is worth putting the life of a citizen at risk to apprehend?
Well, I think, let's put it this way: every time the cops execute a search, every time they do anything in terms of apprehending a criminal, there's always risk to the public. There always is. Okay. And what I'm saying is, this is somebody who's stolen an item that is, I'd say, it could be worth between $10,000 and $40,000 or $10,000 and $50,000. Okay. And I strongly, by the way, Kevin, disagree with your point. Oh, well, insurance pays for it. Just let them get away with it. No. The fact is that if you're misconstruing the context of my point here. And I'd also say, to your point, that you've talked to cops and they tell you that's not worth it. Well, guess what? The head of the FOP, the head of the FOP, who represents police officers, the rank and file police officers, is the one asking for the change in policy. So I think he has probably a better notion of how the cops feel about this, with all due respect, than you do.
Well, first of all, I didn't say you don't put words in my mouth. I sort of love to keep the comments to what I actually said, and I never said that the police didn't say that it wasn't worth it. Those were never.
You said you talked to police officers. What you said you would talk to them, and what did they say?
They told me what the experiences were with regard to criminals taking off when they see police come after them. That was what my commentary about my speaking to police was, and that the fact that these chases more often than not end in crashes. That's where I limited my comments about my commentary of what police officers had shared with me were. Never said they didn't say that it wasn't worth it. I just talked about the risks that were present and what the actions of criminals were.
You know, and the comment about these people, okay, they're in a car, and of course you got the city of Cincinnati, and I don't know what the jurisdiction limits are, because you've got St. Bernard, then you go into Arlington Heights, then you go into Reading, you go into Sycamore Township, you go into that. Over here in northern Kentucky, you've got Dayton, Bellevue, Newport. I think in Kentucky, any police officer, even from you may not be familiar with it, but Alexandria is about 10 miles south of here. If they're driving through the area, they've got jurisdiction to pull somebody over in Cold Spring or Highland Heights, which is 10 miles away from their jurisdiction. I don't know what it is in Ohio or in Cincinnati, but for crying out loud, okay, if you're following somebody and they're on Reading Road and you're following them, you know, eventually they're going to go through Paddock Hills. They're going to go into Silverton. You're saying, hey, I'm pursuing this guy. I'm back. You mean somewhere along those lines, you can't warn people ahead of time? If they're on Walnut Street and they're coming down into the banks, you know they're going to go over to Covington, that you can't alert Covington. If they're not driving fast, if they're not a danger to society at that point, can't you just turn that responsibility over to Covington and let Covington deal with it?
But you got the same issue. Covington's going to follow them. I mean, I understand your point. You're saying, I don't understand your point about turning it over. Somebody's going to have to follow these guys. So what is your point?
Well, when you follow them, you know where they're heading. Okay. They're heading down a street. You tell other cops to at least be in the area. And when you have an opportunity, maybe at a traffic light, pull up and block them in.
I think y'all
Boom.
missing the point.
No chase, no nothing. You mean
y'all
they don't
missing
have
the point. I'm
radios?
wondering
They
if-
can't communicate. They can't coordinate.
Can
Go ahead,
I to
jump in
Kevin's
after you.
point, I agree. That is police work. That is working together with your local, law enforcement to coordinate and strategize on how to safely deal with the criminal. Also, can I just point out the obvious? The car gonna have to stop. It's gonna have to stop at some point. It's got to have put gas in it or something. So eventually the car will stop somewhere. Why isn't the first thought to, again, like Kevin is saying, kind of strategize with your fellow officers or, surrounding precincts or whatever the case may be. And when that car does stop somewhere, you run them plates, you
Okay,
verify.
so you're
you
saying
confirm
they
this
want to
is
do
the
it. You're
stolen
saying,
vehicle,
Raven,
and
they
then
want
you go and make that arrest, because a cop can't just walk up to you and say, hey, does this car belong to you? And you can say yes or no. And then he can reply, well, I just ran the plates and this car is stolen. So can you show me some? And if that's not going, and if that don't, because it's a stolen car. So if they not gonna have that information to verify that it belongs to them, you make that arrest in that moment. Why is that not the
So you're
strategy?
saying that you're
I
saying
think
that
what ought
every
to
chase
happen. I think what ought to happen here is that an undercover cop come up, get beside the guy, flip him off, and then that person will chase him, and then you arrest him. Then
I'll tell you what ought to happen here. What ought to happen here is exactly what happened here, is that they maintain the current Cincinnati pursuit policy, which was not to pursue. They did police work and they found them and arrested them anyway. And so I do not agree with the FOP president. He's got way more experience than me, and I respect his position. But as a citizen, I just feel like it would just make the streets a lot less safe. And so not only should they not change the policy, but if any officer does not comply with that policy and it leads to a citizen's life being lost, that officer should be charged with that crime.
Yeah, I kind of disagree there, Nathan, and because
What part do you disagree with, Kevin?
Well, here's the part that I disagree with is, and we kind of got into this last time we talked about this. I think the culpability for anything that results from criminal activity ought to be placed on the criminal. I do agree that if any officer in the institution of justice violates written policy,
that's what I just said,
needs to be held accountable for that policy. Now, to what extent that should be is debatable. You're saying criminal charges, as if they were the ones responsible for the death of the individual.
No, as if they share some responsibility.
See, and that's where I disagree, because I think what if you take the case in point that we just looked at, and this goes back to my initial point, that bad guys are going to flee when police show up and they know they've broken the law. And so even if police break off their pursuit.
Yeah, but that's not the issue.
Wait a minute. Let me finish. This goes back to responsibility, which is what
that's
we're
what the issue
about.
is.
This is what we're talking about here, responsibility. So they are going to flee regardless. And in this case, they still.
But that's not the issue. It's not whether they flee regardless. It's the rate at which they flee.
But Nathan, this is the point that you're missing. They're fleeing at a high rate regardless when they see the police. Yes, they are, bro. That's the point that you refuse to acknowledge. Because I just got done telling you about the situation with my friend who spoke to me, who said all he was going to do was pull a guy over for not having a license. He fled at a high rate of speed. This is what happens. You're ignoring the fact that bad guys run at a high rate of speed. They're not fleeing at the speed limit. When they see the cops, they floor it.
Here's the point. So earlier you brought up the use of taser policy. So what I'm saying is, if you've got a written policy such as this, and a police officer, for whatever reason, decides that he or she is going to disregard that policy and it leads to a citizen's life, they should be open to being charged, just as it could be with a use of taser policy, and just like it could be with the use of force policy. They've got a policy for all these things. If an officer does not follow it and it leads to somebody's life, they are subject to criminal prosecution. Why are they any different here?
But there are circumstances sometimes, Nathan, I think why I'm not so black and white on that is because there are circumstances that could come into play that you can account for. So you're assuming
why are you so black and white to say no? Shouldn't it be circumstantial? It depends.
Well,
on
sure. I think every policy is circumstantial
Okay.
when you sort of look at it. But
so you agree with me then? Then it is possible that if a police officer does not agree with the pursuit policy and it leads to somebody losing their life, then depending on the circumstances, they could be eligible
That's
for criminal
already
charges.
against the Nathan. It's already against
That's all
the
I'm
law.
saying.
yeah,
It's already, excuse me, it's already
But this
against
is the
law.
reason why we don't need to change the policy, Phil.
Well, now let me just say, if you recklessly pursue an individual, if a cop does, and it leads to a death, the law already deals with that. That's manslaughter or something close to it. Okay, so there isn't a need for an additional policy. And if the cop
Sure there is.
if the cop happened to violate a police policy without committing what is otherwise a crime, then the police have disciplinary means to deal with that.
So let me get this straight, Phil. What you're saying is, in this scenario, if a Cincinnati police officer, we've already got the policy, all of us are now somewhat well versed on what that policy is. If an officer said, you know what, screw the policy, I'm going to chase them anyway, and they chase this person and it leads to a crime, you're telling me the officer should have no criminal liability whatsoever? It's just, oops, my bad, I was trying to do the right thing.
It's just the opposite. Take the example of the guy, the UC cop, that one a couple years ago where the guy was driving away and he shot the guy. Okay. Now, number one, he did violate police policy, but he was found not guilty, but he was charged with committing a crime. So that's already the criminal law already covers those situations. If you act recklessly,
don't get me started on Sam DeBoe's situation there.
Yeah, let's not get started on that. Let's move on.
Don't get me started on that one.
Let's keep it local. Let's move on here. I appreciate it. We can agree to disagree. So more local hot topics. So Cincinnati City Council just approved $500,000 in taxpayer dollars that is going to be allocated for the promotion of programs that will have a positive impact in the lives of trans youth. It'll be $250,000 this year and then $250,000 next year, right? So advocates are saying that, hey, look at the suicide rates. I mean, these are individuals that are being targeted. And what we found out is that trans youth, when they're targeted, they have high rates of suicide. They don't do well in terms of school, and they have all kinds of other serious side effects because of that pressure. Some critics are saying, wait a minute, $500,000 for this? I want to know what you guys think about it. Do you think that this is a good use of taxpayer dollars?
So I've thought along about this, and here's what I think about it. I do think it's a good use of taxpayer dollars, but here's what I really think. And this kind of gets back to some of the language that bothered me a little bit during the presidential campaign. This whole us versus they them versus us, right? There is no they them versus us. There's just simply us. And I think that that's part of the problem that we have in this society, is that we want to try to compartmentalize these things. Look, mental health is a huge issue, period. Regardless of whether you're transgender, LGBTQ, heterosexual, black, white, whatever. Mental health and mental health care is a huge problem that requires greater attention by everybody, governmental, nonprofit, business sector. This is something that is a societal problem that impacts us at every level. It impacts us in schools. It impacts us in productivity in your job place. It impacts you in government, because whether you want to mention it or not, you got a lot of traumatic politicians right now who are trying to govern our country who could probably use a little bit of mental health counseling themselves. So the problem,
maybe some of us on this podcast as well.
Hey, look, nothing wrong with going to see a good therapist or counselor. You know what I'm saying? There's no shame.
I can recommend mine.
Right. So the problem that I have with the conversation is that it shouldn't just be about transgender youth. It should be about how much money is our city government going to contribute to this problem in general to make these services and resources available to whomever, regardless of what category you find yourself in. So I think when we start trying to pull out and say, hey, this money is for this particular group of individuals, you're going to run into these kinds of conversations or problems. Hey, if we agree that mental health is a problem, let's come up with enough robust funding to make sure that transgender kids can get it, that Black kids can get it, who are living in our inner cities, who are dealing with traumatic situations. Let's make sure our kids in Appalachia can have access to it. Let's not put boundaries around who can and who should be able to get these resources.
Right. Well, I'll say that I think I have served on city council, and that doesn't mean I have the final word, but I think it's a complete waste of money and inappropriate for the city to be doing it. Okay. I'm not saying it's not a good cause. I think it's a great cause for private donations, charitable, that kind of thing. But for gosh sakes, where does it stop? How about a couple 100,000 for people who have cancer? How about a couple thousand people for people who are homeless? There are so many causes. All right.
I'm cool with that.
There's an expression, the good is the enemy of the best. All right. Yeah, this is perhaps a good expenditure for the city, but it's not the best. Cities are effective picking up the garbage, dealing with crime, that kind of stuff. I mean, this is so off the wall. And I'll tell you what it is. Okay, it's really just a base play. That's what it is. It's people who are playing to their base, which in a city like Cincinnati, it's kind of liberal. It's a hot topic nationally, so they're kind of playing to that. It's just not, I believe, what cities should be doing.
Well, it definitely is a response to what's happening at the Republican-dominated state house. In city council, I think they talked about that, or it was in the article as well. So it most certainly is a response to that. So you think it's not a good use for money, Phil? Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. There are 100 other causes that would all be good causes, okay? But I think a city is not capable of dealing with all of those causes health-wise or whatever, and has to stick to the fundamentals of basic quality city services.
Yeah. I mean, real quick, because my flow is real quick on this. You know, at the end of the day, we give a lot of lip service about caring about youth and caring about children. I mean, this city can be so hypocritical. We talk all this talk, but when it comes to putting your money where your mouth is, we rarely do so. You know, anything that, you know, is going to uplift individuals, going to help individuals. You got the Republican Party primarily that has spent millions and millions of dollars demonizing trans people. So if the city council wants to take $500,000 to create a space where they can get the type of interactions that they need so they can be healthy, productive Cincinnatians, Ohioans, Americans, I got no problem with it. You know, we need to get over always giving our tax dollars to wealthy people to buy stadiums and to support whatever the latest thing that wealthy people want to do. To me, this is an acknowledgement that there are people out there. Hold on a second. I hear Kevin. Not even sure how that happened. My phone turned on for whatever reason. Hold on. I'm not sure what that is. Yeah, there it is. Stop. So my phone just turned on mysteriously. I don't know what that is. So yeah, I have no problem with it. You know, let's see if it works. Let's see if it works.
Well,
I mean, this says good things about.
I object to this.
We care about trans youth.
I object to the comment about Republicans demonizing transgender. Okay,
really?
Yes.
Because how are you going to do that when that's exactly what they did?
It is not demonizing transgender. It's demonizing the transgender agenda of where you take somebody who is under the age of 18 and you mutilate that child to the point where they are no longer having, and you take away their reproductive rights because they are never going to ever be able to have kids. They don't do anything in terms of this mental health issue, in terms of determining why that is happening. You don't take this situation and then put men in women's sports and to where the point of injuring them. And you don't take men and put them in locker rooms with women. Now, if that's demonizing transgender, then yes, I guess I'm demonizing transgender.
Oh, yes, the Republican Party.
Somebody is transgender, I don't care. I don't really care. But where it affects
What
children,
don't you care about?
where it affects where you look at these situations, and we keep being told that, hey, the European Union, the European model, this is all great. We should follow what's going on in Europe. Europe is looking at this again and saying, wait a minute, this whole idea of doing this transgender surgeries and stuff on kids is the wrong thing to do.
You said
I
you
know
didn't care about
several
something earlier.
people
What
when
was
they
that
were
exactly?
kids. I know
You said you
several
didn't care.
kids that wait a minute. I know there's several kids when they were young were girls or are girls and said, gee whiz, I'd like to go out and play with the boys. I wish I were a boy. And they tried to be like a boy and so on. And at some point in time, they switched. Look at the number of people that
How is that any of your business? So what?
How is that
called
any of
freedom
my
speech.
business?
That's
Well,
called
when the
freedom of expression.
transgender person who identifies as a transgender and says, okay, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, and then goes into a locker room, still has all their junk and disrobing in front of girls, I think that's a problem.
I don't think that's ever really happened.
I
Has that
need
ever
y'all to
happened?
understand something. In a girls' locker room, as the only woman here who has ever been in a woman's bathroom or locker room, I would hope.
Hopefully.
I would hope
that you know of.
on this panel. I don't know what y'all think we doing in there, but we not flashing each other or showing each other our genitals. We go to separate stalls, we handle our business, and we go about our day. So I don't know what y'all think be happening in these bathrooms that I would just be like exposed to a trans female and whatever situation she got going on, genitalia wise. I would never know. I would never know unless there is, because what people seem to forget is that. And I need us to understand me clearly. I am not saying that trans people are perverts, but I am saying that everybody is a pervert. That every demographic of person has the ability to be a pervert. And so if somebody, you're gonna have perverts. Like whether you want to acknowledge trans people or not, somebody is always going to play with that line and toe that line. There was just not that long ago a story in the news about a guy and walking around Walmart taking upskirts of women with his cell phone. Like perverts are what that they have no gender. Perverts have no gender. And so to automatically assume that a trans woman is going to come into a female space and prey on women it's intellectually dishonest.
Well, let me just agree with Raven here. And I think that what has happened here with this topic, and there are a couple of different angles that you can look from this, and this is a robust topic that we should probably take on by itself at one point in the podcast and not mix it up with 2 or 3 other topics because it's that rich. And then I also think the big part of this conversation is that it's always being had by people who are non-trans. Like there's never any voice from the transgender community in here that might be able to shed some insight and help those of us who are ignorant, because I don't think any of us here are transgender, know what that's like, know what the mentality is like, the thought process or living like that is like. But it's always people like us who are discussing this issue and making the rules about it, which I think is problematic in and of itself. But it's a very small part of the conversation, and what's been made is politically, it's been made into this larger than life boogeyman. Look, Ironetta, who couldn't be on here, I asked her about, as someone who works in the school system, she worked in Detroit where she was over a school district of 50,000 students. There was one incident where one out of 50,000 students where she had one transgender athlete who didn't even participate but was thinking about participating in athletics. And it was a huge deal. So one student out of 50,000 students, and I think that's replicative across the country, is being made into this huge national issue and boogeyman where like transgender people are trying to take over. That's just not the case. And where are all of the stories of all of these perverted, cross-dressing transgender men who are violating women in bathrooms? I'm sure if that was happening at the rate that some would have us believe, we would see a lot more news reports about that sort of thing. But you don't. I always said I always want to know who the hell that guy that they had in all of these Sherrod Brown commercials balling with little girls was. I want to find that guy. I want to, or that transgender woman. I want to find that person and interview her, because whoever that individual was, like, at least in the state of Ohio, she had to be one of the most recognizable faces as many times as they ran that commercial. I've never seen
Well,
that person.
Can
That
I
was
say
proven
something?
over and
Can I
over
say
again.
something? I want to
Sure.
do something I don't always do. I want to agree with both Nathan and Kevin A about something. Okay, maybe at least Nathan and I disagree. I don't think they should be funding this, but where I agree with him, and I think Kevin too, Kevin A, is that there's no question that my party, the Republican Party, has been what was your word, targeting or demonizing. They that disgusts me. Okay, and they have done it to transgender, and they've done it to migrants, and I could probably some others, and it's like Trump's poisoning the blood and all this. They have targeted no different than was done in other eras in the past. And I do agree with you guys. I find that absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
And I have a daughter who recently graduated 2 years ago. She's in college now, and this whole transgender thing came up, and it was a non-issue to me. She never had an issue. I haven't gone into the school bathrooms, but I'm assuming they have stalls. So I just don't know what Republicans are thinking of is happening. I'm glad that Raven said what she said. Like, what do Republicans are thinking is happening in the bathroom?
It's
Like,
a base
trans
play.
people are
It's
going
just
in
a play
there
to the
and
base, Nathan. It's a
yeah,
play
they're
to the base.
going in there
When you
and they're
listen
just
to female
and
athletes,
they're trying to indoctrinate people. No, you have stalls in bathrooms, individual stalls. No one's going to see the business that you're taking care of. But
that's in the
It's a
bathrooms
it's a
itself.
solution
When
in
you're
search
talking
of
about the
Republican
individual
men,
locker rooms, there are not
Republican
individual
men
stalls in the
want to
bathroom in their locker
control
room.
every aspect of our lives. And now with this new anti-trans gender bill that DeWine just passed in Ohio, they're doing the same thing. It's the ongoing demonization, vilification of trans people. To me, it's a solution in search of a problem. It's a non-issue. It's not something I worry about. My son is in public school. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, and I think and let me say this again too, because I think there are a lot of tendrils to this. So to Phil's point, I think there's a separate conversation in terms of what Phil is saying in terms of what should government actually be doing and what should they be spending their money on. And then there's this other conversation about the demonization and the vilification of transgender people and what roles, rights, and privileges should they have in our society. I think that for the sake of the conversation we're having here, they're two separate things. So I think one could say, "Hey,
Well,
I don't think government should be spending." I don't think government. Let me finish my point.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a point in saying, "Hey, I don't think government should be spending money on mental health care services, regardless of who it is. They should be spending money on streets and things." I think a lot of times that boils down to what the difference between a conservative point of view is and what a liberal point of view is. Limited government, what government should be doing. I think liberals tend to lean more on the more social side of things and saying the government needs to have a bigger role in solving some of these things. So that's always going to be the clash between conservatives and liberals, is to what extent the government needs to be spending tax dollars on certain aspects of your life. That's a separate conversation that can be had without sort of saying someone is transphobic or homophobic, because that falls along a general line of spending things that can be designated into political. I think what muddies those waters is some of what we see on the political campaign and the trails, where you see ads like what you do and you see the vilification of transgender people that takes it outside of that. Okay, we can have a reasonable debate about what government should be spending money on. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's when you interject these other elements into the conversation that is what complicates it and what makes people question the true motives.
Well, just to clarify, Phil,
against it.
that's a great point. Just to clarify, Phil, is that what you're saying? You're saying that you don't think that local government should be in the business of mental health services, period, or mental health services specifically for trans people?
No, the first one. I totally agree with Kevin A on this. Totally. At least how he may not. In other words, the way he said it was frankly incredibly astute and articulate. Because I am a conservative, limited government guy. If it was mental health services for I don't know who, gays or who knows, I have the same position. But I think at least the 3 or 4 of us, I think, are very offended by the, as you say, the demonization and the way these people have been targeted, migrants, transgender. And I can tell you right now how that happens. They do a poll, and the poll says that the public is really scared about women or trans playing in female sports. So they hit that over and over. And I think an excellent point that's been made here is that the percentage that actually where you have a girl or a transgender now girl playing, the point, playing with women, it's so tiny.
It's so small.
It's a little tiny fraction, and yet it's been played up to become, as you guys have said, just demonizing a group of people.
Okay, where you have a situation where a trans guy or a trans woman or whatever you want to call them plays on a volleyball team and spikes the ball into the head of somebody that causes brain damage to that person, and that they're now crippled, even though that they were on a pathway to getting a scholarship. When you have an Olympic athlete beating the hell out of a woman who is actually a guy, and when you have, what is the latest count, 938 medals that have been taken from women, where the hell are the women? Where the hell are the feminists saying you are taking our sport away from us? This was our venue for our girls to shine, and now you're muddying the waters there.
What sport are you talking about?
What do you mean? What the hell am I talking about?
I'm asking you, what the hell are you talking about? What do you just said a whole lot?
You talking about the Olympics where the guy was beat the
So Kevin, that was actually a false story. And if you did some research on that, it all comes down to this sort of biological XY chromosome situation. And it turns out the boxer was actually a female,
a woman. Yeah,
so that was false information that
had muscles like a guy that looked like a guy.
Again, there's one thing that we know.
So the volleyball player wasn't injured. Riley Gaines wasn't injured by taking a medal
where it is
away
illegal
from
to be trans. So if she were trans, she would not have been participating in the Olympics. It is illegal in her country to be trans.
See, it's that media echo chamber you're living in, Kevin G. And
again, Kevin, there's not saying that there aren't cases. Nobody is saying that there may not be a case here or there of transgender females participating in women's athletics. And I've said on this program myself many times and in other places that from a competitive standpoint, I do have issues with that. I do think from a physiological standpoint that we do know that men have characteristics and traits that physically make them dominant to women. That's not a sexist statement. That's biological statement. That's the facts of what it is. And so if someone is born with the physiology of a male, there's no denying that. There's no denying the advantage that gives. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some women who are more skilled at a sport or whatever it is, regardless of a man's physiology, that they wouldn't come out on top of that individual. But I'm just saying from what we know of competitive men and women's sports, you cannot ignore the physiological and biological traits that exist that might give someone a competitive advantage. Again, I look at it as no different. In that respect, is almost kind of like, performance enhancers. If I have more, if I have something more in me that is a natural part of what I was born as, right? Regardless of how I think of myself or again, what I call myself to be, if I have these physiological, biological markers that are undeniable, I think that it is unfair competitively. And again, this is a competitive thing for me. This is a question of competitive fairness, not anything else. That I think you really have to seriously take a look at that and
I don't think
question whether or not that should be allowed.
And I shouldn't have to say this because I've never met anybody who said, "Oh yeah, it's okay to have a trans man compete in women's sports." I don't know that person. Like outside of maybe the parents,
well, somebody did because the people.
But I don't know anybody like that. So there's been this whole media campaign largely put out there by the Republicans that somehow the Dems are in favor of that. I'm a Dem. I'm not in favor of it. But that's separate.
Well, why is it happening? Why
I
is
mean,
it happening?
is it really happening enough for it to be a real national problem? I don't think so.
Well, there's
And
a
in
college
the states in
volleyball
which it
team,
has happened,
college
like
volleyball team
Ohio,
that has a transgender
it's not
male
happening in
playing for
Ohio
them,
because
and everybody has
Ohio,
been canceling the games. Everybody has been forfeiting. They refuse to play
I think
against them.
I think many states, I think I leave it up to the states, right? You're Republican, states' rights. So just like in Ohio, they've passed a bill to outlaw that. So trans men cannot compete in women's sports. So I leave it up to those
Well,
those
I'd like
respective
to take
states.
that a step further, if I could, and talk about the bathroom bill that DeWine just signed. You know
Going
what I
straight
find
into it, yeah.
what I find interesting about these issues, and again, I'm pointing the fingers at myself as a Republican. There's a real hypocrisy in that we Republicans, and I do, believe in local government, that the big government shouldn't be pushing solutions on local governments. I totally disagree with that thing that DeWine just signed, because why not let the local schools make their own decision? Isn't that what we Republicans are supposed to stand for? The same thing, they do the same thing with critical race theory and all that. These politicians at the state level or even the federal, they want to make a big name for themselves, so they pass these bills. But it's totally contrary to the philosophy that our party is supposed to stand for, which is letting local districts, like local school districts, make their own decision.
Can I just
I
give
think
some
the
people
only
information
I think the
real quick?
only
Hey,
I
Kevin,
think
can you give some people the information about what we're talking about real quick? I know we all are hip to it, but for the audience, what he's talking about is SB 104. It requires academic institutions to set separate bathroom, locker room, and overnight accommodations based on students' biological sex, meaning the sex listed on a student's birth certificate. The bill will also prohibit the construction of any all-gendered restrooms in schools. This is all going to take place within the next 90 days. That's what DeWine just signed.
So here's the only that I kind of somewhat agree with what you were saying, Phil, about local control and letting them determine that. Again, the only space where I would disagree with that is in the sports arena, which is where you have all of your schools around the state competing and participating in the Ohio High School Athletic Association.
Then the athletic association can make that decision. The heads of the local
Sure,
athletic association.
and that's been the
state.
argument. That's been the argument about the Olympics, about any league that deals with this, is that they should be able to formulate and put their own rules around participation. But to your point, a lot of people in your party or an iteration of your party don't agree with that. They feel like it shouldn't be left up to those individual organizations. It shouldn't be left up to the Olympic Committee. It shouldn't be left up to the Ohio High School Athletic Association. It should be left up to the Ohio legislature, who will make this decision. The other thing I'll say is that this is, whether you recognize it or not, another unfunded mandate for public schools here in Ohio that is going to have an exorbitant cost that is going to come along with it, that the state government is not in any way, shape, or form going to come forward with any money to help school districts enforce this policy. School districts are going to need to notify parents. They're going to need to put up signage. They're probably going to have to put some new protocols and things in place to make sure that they're checking, because right now, the way that schools enroll students and they identify them is kind of like a real patchwork. And so there's a lot of knowingly, if you know a student is this particular way, you have to object to it. So there are going to be a lot of things that, if parents are serious about this and they want schools to police and crack down, that school districts are going to have to go the extra mile to make sure that they're identifying students, because you think like a birth certificate is always the way that a student is enrolled in schools and proven that they're sex. That's not the case. And so there are a lot of things that I don't think our state politicians have thought about in terms of what this is going to cost to police and enforce this new law that they've put into place. Quick example. Ironetta shared with me that when they instituted these new policies about having period products in bathrooms, CPS had somewhere in the neighborhood of 378 restrooms throughout the districts that they were going to have to deal with this in. And it wasn't just in the female restrooms, it was in the male restrooms as well. That alone was going to cost the district $300,000 to begin to implement that. So think about that. That's $300,000 cost that came across because of a government an unfunded governmental mandate that the district then had to figure out how they were going to pay for that. Not saying that this is going to cost that much, but it is going to cost something, which means that that's going to be tens to hundreds of $1,000s that our district is going to have to find money for, that they're going to have to take away from someplace else to deal with this.
Well, the thing is that when you're talking about unfunded mandates, we have an awful lot of unfunded mandates that come from the federal government as well. And unless you have a situation where schools and to Phil's point, it should be left up to the individual cities, the communities, or the school boards or something like that. But as soon as you start getting outside funding from either the state or the federal government, suddenly that comes along with strings attached. So as long as there's going to be strings attached to that money, you're going to get these things. Now, if you're going to go to I would love to see a situation where each individual school is somehow funded by the individual school district itself, that they generally handle what's going on because they're closer to the situation, they're closer to the people, so that you don't have the state telling you how to do a school in Ripley, Ohio versus Steubenville, Ohio, or whatever. It's up to the individual communities. But either you, and if the individual cities can't, or the individual school boards can't come up with this money, if the state provides that money, then it should come with no strings attached, or from the federal government with no strings attached. And they should.
Can I throw something in about the federal government?
So,
sorry, go ahead, finish, Kevin.
No, that's pretty much my point.
All right. I think an example recently of this kind of demonization and politicization of this is this representative, Nancy, I think it's Nancy Mace from South Carolina, who, by the way, went from sort of an anti-Trump after January 6th to kissing up to him and that whole group as much as she could. So there's one trans person that was just elected from Delaware. Last name is McBride.
At some point in time, I wish that this conversation
let me finish
would get away from Trump. And if you want to bring stuff up, let's talk about what happened during the campaign. The $1.5 billion that was blown through. This drunken video that Kamala put out the other day, and we can talk about that. But
he triggered you, Kevin.
Let's
Phil got you. He triggered you.
Going against, and Phil, switch parties. Do us all a favor and admit that you're a Democrat.
Yeah, no, the only.
Let's get away from Trump. Let's get away from demonizing the Republican Party and stay on top.
Let me respond. Because I've had a lot of people, and I want to get what I started saying. I want to say it quickly. Is Nancy Mace, who's a Republican congressperson from South Carolina, wanted to score points with her base. And so she made this big deal about, we're going to pass a regulation that nobody in Congress can use the other bathroom, whatever. And the truth is, when I understand, they all have their own bathrooms. So it was all a bullshit, pardon my language, a bullshit thing she did to play up to that base, to her base, which to me is an example of, in this case, demonizing one person. It was totally unnecessary. There was no risk of people in Congress. The girl's having some guy with a penis or something like that. There was no risk. It was all politics. But if I may quickly respond to my friend Kevin.
But when a bill is filed, the people in charge can push back on that and say, Nancy, we're not doing this. But somewhere along the line, the other side probably wanted to make this a big deal or whatever.
No, they didn't.
You're going to tell me that the Democrats don't do stuff to score points or to make a point?
I'm just giving you this example.
Are you that delirious?
This is one example.
Do you hate Republicans that much, Phil? You can't even admit that the Democrats do this as well? Come on.
Look at you trying to spin this and turn this whole thing, Kevin G.
I'm happy to listen to any examples. I just provided an example of demonizing one individual so the Nancy Mace could suck up to her base, which I think disgusts me. But if I may quickly respond to my friend's point about why don't I be a Democrat, I think I've demonstrated time and again on this podcast, based on disagreeing with a lot of people, that I am a conservative Republican. But as a former prosecutor, I am not going to support a guy who is dishonest, corrupt, and is a demagogue that wants to become a dictator. That doesn't make me a Democrat. I think that makes me, frankly, a patriot.
Phil,
I think it makes you a patriot too, Phil.
My response to that, Phil, is it takes one to know one.
Oh my God! How are we doing now, Kevin?
Patriots
Wow.
Can
and
also
okay.
just put out there, because I was
Uh,
listening as you were describing what the bill was, and at the tail end there was also that part about stopping schools from adding an all gender bathroom, and
mhm.
that right there is what let me know, oh, this is predatory.
Yep.
This is predatory. This has nothing to do with actually protecting anybody. It's a dig at trans people
It's a
I
punishment.
because
agree. I agree with that part right there.
It's a
absolutely,
punishment.
Absolutely.
because why would that part even need to be added if you are trying to solve a problem? I'm somebody who on a radio station here, I am, bleeding heart for most liberal causes. Let's just keep it a buck for kids, for trans and LGBTQ things. But I've always maintained that I don't believe that trans people should be removed from being able to participate. I do acknowledge, however, that my biology is completely different than that of a trans woman. And so, based on that alone, there has to be some level of either separation or compromise. And the compromise in that is why do we shun the concept of unisex anything or all gender anything? If I am walking into this arena and I know that I have the possibility of playing a trans woman and I'm accepting of that, then whatever happens, happens. However, we decide to set up the bathrooms or locker rooms, I am agreeing to that because I am walking in saying yes to playing this other athlete, whether they be trans, whether they be cis hetero, which is, what all of us, I believe, on this panel are. If you don't, or if you're not familiar with the term, if you're not trans, you're cis. And so if we create a space where either all genders can walk in with the understanding that I might have to compete against somebody who is either cis or trans, and I'm accepting of that, why are we so scared to create that space? And the same
Well,
thing with these bathrooms. Why are we so scared to create a space where these kids might not care if their trans friend is in the same bathroom as them? It's not that big of a deal to them. So why not give them the space to either give them an all gender bathroom or a private bathroom where anybody can use that bathroom, but it's one at a time.
well, what
Yeah,
I can
and they
figure
do.
out,
They already do that though, Raven. I mean, I do think there are unisex, one stall, one use
Yeah.
bathrooms that are available there. I think what the bill talks about is sort of having something that's more broad ranging, where you
Yeah,
have
where multiple
multiple
people can be
stalls
in
or
a
something like
shared
that.
bathroom
Where
space.
and so
But
I can understand. And you're right. Most of the kids don't. It's not a big deal to them. They're
yeah,
growing up in a time and in a generation where they're not hung up on a lot of the stuff that people of my generation and older are.
yeah.
Right? They're just not. And so they won't care or don't care. Many of them don't. I won't say every one of them don't, but many of them don't. But from a parent standpoint, their parents have an issue with the idea of that. And there's this notion of, hey, I don't want my kid being it, whether it's a transgender female or an actual boy, I don't want to potentially subject my daughter to seeing the physical parts of a man that I don't feel like
And
she's
I
at
and
an
I
age
and I
to deal
understand
with.
that. I get that. But why is there not space for both? Why not have traditional bathrooms and an all gender bathroom? Or is that just too much to ask for?
You know
I
why?
think it
You
is.
know
I think
why?
it is. I think it is in a public education space. I think it is for that very reason, because you're always going to have parents who are going to be uncomfortable with that. I'm not suggesting that what you're saying is that we shouldn't be at a point where we evolve to rethink how we look at a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I think over time that is going to happen. It's inevitable. But I think like right now where we are, there's still a lot of that mentality and a lot of fear and a lot of protectiveness among the parents. But here's the protection piece that people are missing. And there was a great opinion column that we ran in the Enquirer this week from a transgender woman who has gone through the treatments, who has had the sex change, all of that, and is a graduate student at Miami, and who will now, even though physically the way that she looks and everything about her appearance as a woman, she is now going to have to go into the men's bathroom and use that facility because that is what she was quote unquote born as. Okay. Now there's no regard given to her level of protection and what she's going to run into when a man sees her in there and either perceives her to be a woman and is like, well, hey, what is this woman doing in the restroom? Now you've created a situation where she has to explain herself,
There's
or
also the reverse.
might
I
even
think
subject herself to some sort of physical assault or violation, either by a man who wants to take advantage of her sexually, or a man who is offended by just the fact that she exists and may want to physically take that out. What lawmakers have not thought about is that individual's health and safety.
And where's that?
There's also the reverse though, because there are
entire...
trans men as well. Trans men who have, one of my closest friends in this on this earth is a trans man, born female, transition to male. Under this rule, they would have to go into appearing very much so male. They would have to go into a female restroom because they were assigned female at birth, and that comes with a whole other caveat of things. I know fathers who won't take their daughter inside the women's bathroom because they don't want to make women in that bathroom feel uncomfortable. So imagine a fully masculine appearing trans man walking into a female bathroom. They're going to have to explain so many times why they're there and why they deserve to even be in that space, because they appear, by all intents and purposes, they appear male and they're in a female space.
All right. Now to Kevin's point, this person, this female or trans woman, who he's gone through all of the change and the whole 9 yards and loss of plumbing and all that sort of thing. You know, if the person looks like a woman and appears to be a woman and goes into a woman's bathroom, who the hell's going to know? To Raven's point, all the women's bathrooms have the stalls, so they don't know. You go into a men's bathroom and they have the urinals. If Raven's best friend is a male, there's plenty of stalls that they can go into if they don't have I don't know if they've got the proper plumbing or whatever.
But if you come out of that stall to come wash your hands and you're surrounded by feminine looking women and you are a very masculine looking trans man, that is going to cause quite a stir.
Well, exactly. So if you look like a man, I mean, nobody's going to be. I don't think there's going to be the bathroom police that's going to, show me your junk before you go into the bathroom. If a person looks like a man and appears to be a man and uses a man's bathroom, I don't think anybody's going to question that.
And Kevin, you make the point. You're making a great point as to why this law is unnecessary, if that's your point of view, because most trans people would say that's the way it's been all along. We've been using the restrooms all along, and you didn't know it.
Well, I tell you what, there's been an awful lot of
what has happened is that this vilification, this campaign against transgender has a whole lot of people thinking that transgender women are going into the women's stalls and whipping their stuff out so that every woman in the bathroom can see it. First of all, and Raven, you can attest to this, women's bathrooms don't have urinals in them.
No, they do not.
So most of the time you're in a stall with the door closed. Mm-hmm. So I doubt very seriously a trans woman is standing up, urinating into a stall in the bathroom. I don't think that's happening. Yeah. I think a trans woman is probably sitting in the stall just like a woman would. So you would never have any way of knowing, Kevin, unless, like you said, you've got the trans police going in, making sure. And this is what is so ridiculous about this whole argument from the beginning. That's why I said it's this boogeyman that's been created by the other side.
Well, if I read this story,
people would tell you is exactly what you just described, Kevin, is what's been happening for
by
years.
The Republican Party. Put a name on it, Kevin A. By the Republican Party. It's more of the vilification. And my fear is it adds to this culture that is against trans youth. And now we understand why the suicide rates are so high. It's part of that whole culture. It's not that it's a non-issue. I care. I just focus on, when you talk about trans people, I focus on the people part. They're people. Period. I mean, how they live their life, whatever happened to freedom of expression. And you know what, to Phil and Kevin, whatever happened to the Republican Party being the party of staying out of your business? Now you're in the stall with me, telling me where I can go and what type of bathroom structures we can have. It's just a complete reversal.
Well, if we're talking about a bill
said that it was all about for so many years.
If we're talking about a bill of where Kevin Gordon today decides that I'm going to identify as a woman and I'm start going into women's bathrooms, I think that's a problem. Raven, you are a very attractive female that if you suddenly decided that you were going to be a trans man and go walking into a men's bathroom, I think men would be going like, what the hell is she doing in here? Now, if you look the part, who's going to question it?
But that's also a difficult territory to reside in, because a lot of trans people, it varies. We see this, actually, we even see this without being trans. There are plenty of cis, we were just talking about it, the boxer who everybody assumed was a trans female and was just a regular woman. You cannot assess what somebody's gender is based on what they look like alone.
Absolutely.
And that's where the issue comes into play. You cannot tell what somebody's gender is just off of what they look like. And so it kind of creates a problem when you're trying to tell somebody, well, you can go into this bathroom because you look like this, or you can go to this bathroom because you look like this. What happens when you have a woman like that boxer who has what is assumed to be very masculine features, when really they're just fit. They're just an athlete. They just have muscles and have toned bodies. How do you tell that woman she can't go in the bathroom and use the bathroom where she's supposed to use the bathroom because she don't look like a woman? How do you say that?
You make an excellent point, because if you ever watch those old Maury Povich or Oprah Winfrey episodes where they have to try to guess whether this person is transgender or an actual woman, there are a lot of times there are some beautiful transgender people who you would think are men who you cannot tell the difference when they prepare themselves that they are any different from a woman. And likewise, there are a lot of women who people said, well, she looked kind of manly. And I always, on those shows, I always felt like, man, I just wonder how those women who are actually women feel like when somebody look at them and say,
oh, that's a man.
I thought you was a man and they're a real woman. So it's kind of like part of the problem that I have with this. And this is where I think we struggle with this as a society. And I listened to the language that Kevin used. He said, if one day I decide that this is who I am, like Kevin is speaking of this as if this is a conscious decision that one day, you know what? One day I just woke up and decided, I no longer wanted to be a man. I wanted to be a woman.
Then why do they call it I identify as a woman?
Let me finish, Kevin. There's this sense that gay people and that transgender people are that way by a choice, a conscious choice that they made. Now,
you deny that there are some?
Now, there in fact are some people who do that.
Thank you.
But I think that there's a difference, though, Kevin. There's a difference between somebody who may cross-dress and someone who is transgender. And I think that's why I say, like, having people who are transgender on to talk about that is very important, because I think a lot of times when we say transgender, what we really mean is cross-dressing, people who are perping, who are men and women who are pretending to be something else.
And we also have to make a distinction between gender and sexuality. They are not one and the same. Gender is one thing, sexuality is another. So you can be a trans woman, male transition to female, and still be attracted to women. So I'm there with you, Kevin, but I had to make that distinction because I think we get those things swirled all together, because of course it's the LGBTQIA. They add that stuff all in there, like words like letter jumbo or whatever, or gumbo or whatever. But there is a distinction between gender and sexuality. And so I am somebody who does believe that as far as sexuality goes, for a lot of people, it is a spectrum. Some people are a lot more one way than the other, some people are born, gay or lesbian, but there are also people who later in life or via inexperience or something, they partake in something and they be like, you know what, this is not for me. And then they go back to whatever was originally the original, you know what I'm saying, how they view sexuality. It's a spectrum. Gender, not so much. I think that gender is something that you kind of know. Like, I've never met a trans person who has ever said to me, at a certain point, I just felt like I needed a change up or a switch up. I kind of knew I was different from a very young age, but I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know how to go about it. And so I kind of stayed what I was assigned because I didn't know any better until I got the education, until I learned more about myself and I was more confident in expressing my femininity or my masculinity. But I've always felt like this. I've always been this person. Sexuality, you can say that, but there are also people who can also definitely say, yeah, in college I was hooking up with this girl and it kind of opened my mind to bi curiosity or whatever, but I know deep down inside I'm gonna marry a man. So it's a little bit different in that way. At least
Yeah.
from what the conversations that I've had with both transgender people and with people who are not hetero, it's a spectrum more on sexuality than it is on gender.
Yeah.
All
Thank you for
excellent
that
points, man. I
clarification.
mean,
Yeah.
great points. I mean, all the way around, great points. I like the way that they're pulling this back.
And I'm
this
trying
Kevin,
to figure out. I have not been in a public building in a very long time where there aren't the male symbol, and then the female symbol, and then like the family bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, from a guy who, when he's got to go, and I come up to a sign and it's got the woman and the man, I got to take a precaution real quick. Okay, which bathroom am I supposed to go into, and just do it.
Yeah.
Now, so I don't understand if this bill is saying that you can't construct unisex bathrooms. That's stupid.
You can. The bill itself says they cannot construct a public all gender bathroom, so it wouldn't be a private bathroom.
Right. It's not
so
stupid,
the ones you talk about, Kevin, the family restrooms are generally sort of like one stall, one urinal usage type things, not like a men's room that you would walk into where there is where there are many stalls. Yeah. That's what the bill is prohibiting.
And as you brought up, Ironetta being with the Detroit school, one instance out of 50,000 students. You tell me that they can't make some sort of an accommodation on that?
That wasn't simply about, that was about athletic participation. Yeah. I'm not sure what they did with that student with regard to the restrooms there.
But let me make a point as well before we move on, because we got a couple more topics that we got. The time is that it needs to be said that just because you're a trans person, no matter what your original gender was, it doesn't mean that you're overly sexualized. Like, part of what I'm thinking that Republicans are thinking is that when trans people go into the bathroom, they trying to get it popping. It's all about sex. They had the same mistake. They made the same mistake about gay people. Yeah. And I used to argue against it. Like, just because they're gay doesn't mean they're just going to have sex with any warm body that gets close to them. And it's wrong. And it goes back to the further targeting of these individuals. So, but great points all the way around.
You must be hanging around with the wrong people. That's all I can say.
Here's what I think it is, Nathan. It kind of gets back to sort of what we were in a weird way. And I always get in trouble when I do these analogies because people will always try to say, and they kind of miss the point. So I guess I'm not effectively doing a good job of expressing what I'm trying to say. I'll just simply say this. It's easy to believe things about people when you other them, when you dehumanize them. And so when you look at a way of life as a perversion, then you begin to think that they're capable of anything. And I think a lot of people you're exactly where I was going. I wasn't gonna go there. I was gonna avoid that because I didn't want to get hit with the apples and oranges thing. So I wouldn't go. But thank you. That's exactly where I was going. But what I'll say is that anytime we other people, then they suddenly become capable of us projecting our worst fears on them. I mean, look. If we get it down to the basic compound, let's just take it to men and women. Men and women's dealings. We have that. If you want to talk about Me Too and all of that and the aftermath of that, it's because the dynamics of relationships are complicated, even between heterosexual men and women. And it's a highly sexualized situation when men and women get together. And so I think a lot of times that hetero people assume that the same thing is transferred on down the line to everybody else, regardless of whether you're LGBTQ or whatever, because the nature of when you put men and women in a room together, whether they'll admit it or not, if there's some level of attraction there, there's going to be some sexual attention in some way, shape, or form that's going to create some uncomfortable situations. We don't like to talk about that publicly. We like to pretend that we are holier than thou and higher than mighty, and that doesn't happen to us. But anybody who's worked in a workplace with somebody who is attractive that sits in a stall next to you and you're wondering, man, am I going to cross the line if I compliment her hair or how she's dressed today? That is a sexual dynamic that exists, that I think we transfer on to other people. And I think that's why it's hard for us to say, can a transgender woman occupy a female restroom without there being, like you were saying, without it getting popping, because we can't understand that that transgender woman is not a male in the way that we think of heterosexual men.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on here. So, going back like a week ago, I think that was when Trump went to the White House. He met with President Biden. This is very customary for the president-elect to meet before Inauguration Day with the current president, although we did not see this back in 2020. And during that meeting, it was very cordial. Biden was very cordial. He's very polite. He talked a lot about a peaceful transfer, and he was criticized by people, including by the name of Charlemagne the God. On his radio show, he called out Biden and said, like, look, like, where is all the, you're a threat to democracy talk, and where's all the fascism talk? And there were feelings either side of that. I kind of understood where he was coming from, but also kind of understood what Biden did. And so coming up, the inauguration will be in January. Joe Biden has said that he will attend the inauguration of Donald Trump, even though 4 years ago, Donald Trump boycotted the inauguration because he was still telling lies about the election being stolen. And I want to get your thoughts about that, which it was not. There's no statistical evidence whatsoever. But my question to you is, should Biden attend the inauguration? He talks so much about
it's a personal choice.
Let me get that's great. Let me get the question out. Should he attend the inauguration? Because he talks so much about Trump being a threat to democracy, fascism, and all the other issues.
I'd like to ask the question of all you that voted for.
Would it be wrong if Joe Biden did not attend?
I would like to ask the question of everybody that voted for Kamala Harris is, do you feel as though that you were lied to for the last 6, 8, 9, 12, 14 months or whatever? Because if somebody is an existential threat to democracy, then why would you meet with them? When the assassination attempt happened, why would you reach out to that person and say, I'm glad you're okay?
Because you're a decent human being.
Yeah.
Humanity.
And I think that's what's been lost. You guys hit on a great point. Is I think that there's a human decency element. There's a what is presidential element. There's a what should you do element, that all of the things that Donald Trump did not exhibit when he lost. I think Joe Biden, to some degree, is trying to emulate and again show the American people, hey, I'm not this guy. This is not how it should operate. I don't think it minimizes, maybe in their mind, their belief in the fact that he was an existential threat. I can see where Charlemagne the God is coming from and other people who are saying that, but Charlemagne the God is not the president of the United States. He's not responsible for the tone and tenor that you want to set for the nation. Look, we are in a delicate space right now in terms of the division in this country. And
until January, he's still the sitting president. So he must remain in his role until it's time for him to go. That means carrying out those presidential duties. And part of that is how you transition power. So to expect him to just be in the White House, like fuming and cussing people out, and it's never going to be that. And it never should be that. It should never come to that. We had to witness for the last 4 years somebody be a sore loser. And it's become so normalized because we've been watching it happen for the last 4 years that now that is the expectation. And that is why someone like myself did not vote for that particular administration, because I know what comes with that. It comes with, and I know this is kind of off topic, but we there now. That comes with putting somebody like that in office, comes with all of the tone that he set when he was there, and then when he couldn't get back there in the next 4 years, and now his return, his triumphant return. It comes with what we've been saying for the last 8-12 years, which is that he has done such a disservice to that office that now the expectation is for our sitting current president to take this very personally and act in a way that is not becoming of a president. And I don't like that assumption. I don't.
Well, we can go back 24. We can go back to 24 years, and Al Gore refused at points, and he still doesn't think that he lost that election. John Kerry doesn't think that he lost that election. Hillary Clinton kept talking about for the last 8 years or better, since 2016, that Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. She still thinks that she should have been elected, and she thinks that there were some shenanigans that were done there. She's still portraying the Russian hoax. So don't just lay this all in the feet of Donald Trump. The fact that you guys have been lied to.
Was not a sitting president, though.
Mark Milley has come out and said, hey, we're going to be fine. He isn't an existential threat. He isn't Hitler. He isn't Mussolini and all this sort of stuff. You guys have been lied to.
Hey, look, Kevin, let me say this. That is not it's not Joe Biden's job to prove any longer that Donald Trump is an existential threat.
He said it.
Wait a minute. Let me finish. Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democrats tried that. They tried to prove to the American people that he was. Enough of the American people didn't buy it. They voted for him. He is now the president of elect.
Not only did they not buy it, they didn't believe it.
Let me finish, Kevin. So it is no longer on the Democrats or Biden to prove that Donald Trump is an existential threat. It's on Donald Trump to show the country that he's not by how he leads. So the proof is in his corner now in terms of how he leads.
No.
And if he is the threat, if he is the threat that
the
Democrats
proof isn't there. The proof is always
if he is the threat that Democrats said he was, it'll show itself over time through his actions and what he does. And then we all have to reap, unfortunately, the negative consequences of that.
Al Gore conceded the election. Hillary Clinton conceded the election.
No, she didn't.
Clarify. Yes, she absolutely did. She called Donald Trump the very next day, and she thanked him and conceded.
Then why is she still whining about the fact that the Russian hoax kept her from being president?
I don't know what Russian hoax is about.
Everybody who's ever lost a contest, always talks about why they lost, how the referees were against them. If you're talking about in sports, if this play had gone that way or a call we didn't get, anytime somebody loses, I don't know anybody that loses that doesn't have some sort of commentary after the loss to try to explain the loss away or talk about how things could have been different. I think that's very different. That's very different than organizing an assault on the Capitol, trying to stop the certification of an election process. It's different. It's not the same thing. I understand sour grapes.
Donald Trump did not incite an insurrection.
Okay.
Yes,
he did.
That's what you've been lying to about.
Can I jump in here?
That Republican echo chamber. Phil, you want to get in? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Should Biden go to the inauguration? Should Biden go to the inauguration?
Absolutely.
It's up to him.
I think, well, of course, it's up to anybody if they want to attack the Capitol and try to overturn an election. That's not the issue. But let me say that meeting between Biden and Trump was an incredible comparison in class. You have one guy who was a sore loser, tried to overturn the election, did incite a riot, and
no, he did not. Quit lying, Phil. Quit lying. Okay.
You tell the truth, Phil.
And you have the one guy I was just talking about who didn't have the humility to go to the next president's inauguration, didn't have the guts, was too little a person. And here you have a guy, Biden, who frankly has gone through incredible humiliation himself for having to get out of the race because he is seen as being too old.
Knifed him in the back. Yeah.
He has gone through incredible, real humiliation. I don't necessarily blame I think he should have gotten out, but here's a man who cares enough about our constitutional government and about our norms and about the peaceful transfer of power that he is making a point that even though he has said over and over and has never changed that this guy is a threat to democracy. He said it and he believes it. But he had the humility, the grace, and the class to do what Trump didn't have the grace.
And I would say he's a coward.
How about let me finish?
Who in the hell would sit there and invite Hitler into the White House?
Let him finish, Kevin. Let him finish. Go ahead, Phil.
Biden, as much as he frankly, and we know, despises and disrespects Trump, believes enough in our Constitution and the peaceful transfer of power that whether he's Hitler, Mussolini, or anybody, if that person won, he has the class and the belief in the constitutional order to do what every other president has done, which is invite him to the White House, agree to a peaceful transfer, and to cooperate, and then to attend the inauguration of someone he does believe is a threat to democracy. And so I respectfully disagree 100% with what Charlemagne said. What's Charlemagne saying? Oh, well, Biden ought to incite an attack on the Capitol. Is that what he's saying?
No,
he ought to try to
that's not what
overturn
he's
the
saying.
election like he should, like his predecessor did.
No.
And with all due respect,
His
I disagree
predecessor
as
did
much.
not. That's a whole other lie, Phil. Switch
I
parties
disagree.
and be done with it, for God's sake.
I
Can I get a word in?
I
Can
dis-
I get a word in real quick?
I
The
disagree.
Democrat
I
Party.
disagree as much with Charlemagne as I do with you, Kevin G, because the fact of the matter is that there is ample proof, which the January 6th committee and the Justice Department pulled out, that Donald Trump did everything he could by pressuring Mike Pence, pressuring the Justice Department, pressuring the guys in Georgia and Michigan to overturn a valid election, and then didn't have the guts and the humility to admit it and attend the inauguration, as compared to Joe Biden, who did have the class and the grace and the guts to do it.
Okay, now when we talk about statistical
that's why I
differences here,
respectfully
okay?
disagree
When
with
we talk
you
about
and
statistical difference, let me ask you
Kevin,
one
let me get a
question.
word in. Kevin G, let me get a word
Let
in.
me ask one question before you jump in.
Go right ahead.
What happened to what happened? Apparently, there's 9 million people that between 2020 and the 2024 election that miraculously disappeared. Where'd they go?
Well, that's a separate topic. I thought it was going to be on this topic.
6 million
Okay,
people.
but just continue.
So let me get a word in here. So,
continue with your
Obama's
hoax.
elections.
Yeah, our hoax. Yeah, he was impeached by bipartisan impeachment, by the way. Republicans jumped on board, but facts don't matter in the Republican echo chamber world. I get it. But to answer the questions, there's two different questions.
What, bipartisan by what? 1 vote, 2 votes, 2
bipartisan. What does bipartisan mean? That means you get Democrats and Republicans.
2 Heimlich Republicans jumped across the line.
Bipartisan means Republican and Democrat. So, there's 2 different questions I posed here. So one is what Charlemagne the God said about the meeting between Biden and Trump at the White House, and then should Biden attend the inauguration? So let me answer both. Charlemagne the God is 100,000% right. There is nothing wrong. Biden should have taken that opportunity in front of the cameras to look Trump in the eye and say 2 things. You won, congrats. But here are my issues with you. And I still have these issues with you. He should have taken that time in front of the media to tell that man exactly what he was saying about him all through the campaign.
Because he didn't believe it.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if he believes it or not. I'm just saying, if it were me, I would have told him straight to his face, you can do 2 things at the same time. Hey, you won fair and square. Congrats. But I think that you are a fascist. I'm concerned about the moves you made. You're an insurrectionist. I would have done that.
He said that over and over.
That would have been meaningless.
It would not have.
But there's a difference. All that would have been was political theater.
That moment
deserves that. And Biden said we're going to be just fine.
Let me get it out. That moment is a once in a lifetime moment. You've got the incoming president-elect with the sitting president. You cannot recreate that moment. He should have done exactly what Charlemagne the God said and spoke his honest truth while at the same time congratulating him. In terms of Biden attending the inauguration, I believe that as a president, that position is bigger than your personal feelings. And there are certain things that you just have to do. And for me, showing up at the inauguration is one of those things. So I think that Biden should attend the inauguration because that's what we should expect from that office.
Can I ask you a question real fast, Nathan?
Sure.
To what end would you have Biden take that moment of meeting after the fact and saying, yeah, congratulations, but I got this issue and I got this issue and I got this issue. What exactly for you does that do? I guess is my question. Like for the general public, for the American citizens, what does that do?
Nothing.
Well, it keeps it. What it says is that what you said about this man during the campaign is what you still truly believe, right?
There's no part that doesn't believe
that. Why does he have to do that?
Let me finish. It sends the message that you weren't just talking that stuff during the campaign, that you really believe it. But what it also does is it sets up a media cycle that other Democrats can run on, and things you can set the table as he
They're gonna
begins.
do that
As
anyway, Nathan. They're
he
gonna
can
do.
set the
Here's why
table.
it's meaningless. Here's
And
why it's meaningless.
it's never meaningless
It
to
is
tell the truth.
meaningless. It is meaningless.
It is
Stop it. It's
never
meaningless.
meaningless to speak
Here's
truth to
why it's
power.
meaningless, Nathan. Nathan, here's why it's meaningless. Joe Biden spent the better part of a year saying everything that you said that he was supposed to say. And here's what I'm saying. The American people didn't buy it. That's what Democrats have to accept, is that the American people did not buy the existential threat, or at least they did not buy it to the extent that they cared more about that than their pocketbook.
That's a whole separate issue.
So Joe Biden coming out. So if that wasn't enough, so if a year of saying this dude is Hitler, he's a fascist, if that wasn't enough to convince the American people that it was true,
It's not about convincing
that
the
at that
American
point
people
was
per
not
se.
going to make a difference. Would it have made Democrats feel good? Yeah, but so what?
It's
So
not
what,
about
man?
making people feel good.
What good is a feel good? This guy
It's
is
not
still
about
the
feel
president.
good. It's not about feel good.
Look,
That's
the
what you're
only thing that's
reducing
going
it
to
to.
change, again, look, the only thing that's going to change the Americans' people mind, and I'm convinced of this.
It's not about changing the American people's mind. It's about speaking truth to power.
It is about changing their minds. If you believe he's Hitler and he's a fascist, it's absolutely about changing their minds.
No, it's not. It's about being consistent to what you've been saying.
Who gives a damn about consistency?
Obviously,
who gives a damn about consistency if you got Hitler in the White House? Who gives a damn about consistency? The idea is if you believe this guy is a threat, the idea is to get him out of there. And the only way at this point you convince people of that is they have to see it. That's why I said it's on Trump.
Now you're missing
to
the
prove
point.
that he's not that.
You're missing the
point.
point.
I believe
you're
that Trump
the
is
point,
who
Kevin.
he is, and he's going to show the American people. And as they say, Americans going to F around and find out. And they are.
You're missing the
and
point
that's
completely.
what's going to change minds.
You're missing the point completely. There is always a need to speak truth to power in that moment. That's the reason why Charlemagne the God is reacting. A lot of people thought that Joe Biden, and by extension, they think the Democrats are weak because they talk it, but they don't talk it all the time. And so if Joe Biden has spoke his truth and said, look, here's how I feel about you. I ain't changed on how I feel about you. This is what I think about you. You won. At the very least, it would have helped to change people's perceptions about Joe Biden and Democrats from being weak and just going with the flow, and also standing on business. That's the reason why MAGA really enjoyed Trump not showing up at the inauguration, because he was standing on his business. They felt like
that was good for the country.
They felt like his actions were consistent all the way through. And
so
whether
is
you
that
like
good
it or
for
not,
the country, though, Nathan? Is that
whether you like it or not,
we want people to
whether
do
you
what's
like
going
it
to
or
make us
not,
feel good, or what's good
authenticity
for the
matters to
country.
people.
What's a better sign of leadership? What's a better sign?
It's not about a better sign of leadership, because Donald Trump didn't show
because
any
I don't
signs
think
of good
I don't think
leadership.
any of
We
us
both
on
can't
here
talk.
outside of
We
Kevin
both
Gordon,
can't talk.
outside
We
of
both
Kevin
can't talk.
Gordon
Let me
would
finish,
agree
and
that
I'll
how
let you
Trump
get in.
handled it was the right way. I don't think
I
any of us
can't hear anything that you're saying, because you're talking underneath me. So let me get it out, and I'll give you the floor. Authenticity matters. And when you look at people that support Trump, that's what they point to. He is who he is all the time.
I don't think Charlemagne the
people
God
are
is
looking
authentic.
at authenticity. And that's what would have
Charlemagne
been
the God
gained by
is
Joe
authentic.
Biden and the Democrats. The Democrats got to stop playing by the rules and understand there's a new world order.
I don't think Charlemagne the God is authentic.
You don't beat the perception of evil with more evil, Nathan. That just makes matters
But you're not
worse.
trying to beat the perception of evil.
No, you just said you got to stop playing by the rules.
You got to stop playing by the old rule
That's
book.
exactly what Trump does. So you're saying the Democrats need to become Trump.
Let's do this.
And
let's
if
do
that's
this,
the
Kevin.
case, then they are the ultimate hypocrites. They are the ultimate hypocrites. If what you are suggesting is they become like the thing that they hate, and that is the ultimate form of hypocrisy.
Hey, Kevin, let me ask you a question. Kevin Gordon, when Donald Trump did not attend the transition, right? He didn't show up at the inauguration. How did you feel about that? Did that make you feel like, oh, he's standing on his guns? Or how did you feel about that, Kevin?
I think he was authentic. I think he didn't believe that the election was correct, and I think he stated that. I want to say I don't think Charlemagne the God is authentic. I think he's doing a shock jock. I think he made the comment just to stir controversy. Because I'll tell you what, I'd go back to 2020. If somebody came on my radio program and told me that if I don't vote for him, I ain't black, I'd tell him to go himself. I would tell him, how dare you come
I would have
on
checked
my
Biden right
program
then when you said
and do that.
I would have checked him right then.
And quite
Here's
honestly,
a better
as any
question,
African American
Nate. Let me
is
ask
concerned, I don't know why I wouldn't put up with that. I would say, you mean to tell me that I can't have a separate thought than anybody else? We all look alike, we all act alike, we all behave alike, and we all vote alike? Are you nuts?
Look, let me ask. This is a better question, Kevin. So that was a bit of a setup. Let me ask you this one. So when Trump ran in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, he dogged Obama pretty bad, talked about Barack Obama pretty bad, said that he thought Obama wasn't a U.S. citizen. Yet
So did Hillary Clinton.
Wait a minute. Let me finish.
Hillary started that.
So let me say this, Kevin. So when he won, he went in and he sat down with President Barack Obama in the White House, called him a nice guy. Now, this is a guy who he had said that President Obama shouldn't be president because he's not an American citizen. Yet he came
when the proof was done or when the proof was presented, he accepted the proof that was presented.
Look, he never believed it in the beginning, and he admitted that even later. But this is what I'm saying about the crap.
But Hillary did.
The authenticity of Donald Trump. And Kevin, you and everybody who supports Donald Trump lies about this. You guys know he's a con man. You know he's a liar. Just like he made up the birther thing, he never believed that. You know he never believed that. He said he never believed that. So if he goes in and sits down with a guy that he's vilified, said shouldn't be president because he was a birther, and that's more authentic than Joe Biden inviting him into the White House and sitting down. This is the stuff that I think that's a bad example. That just aggravates me, that irks me with people that they don't think.
Kevin, you're absolutely wrong on this. If you go back to what Hillary Clinton started as far as the birther thing was concerned, because she's basically herself as a
guy on the face of the earth. But get out of here with that crap.
Let's go. What? What'd you say?
I said Trump is the least authentic guy out there on the face of the earth. He's a snake oil salesman.
Listen, I agree with you, but I'm just telling you what I'm picking up from the internet and what other people are believing. A lot of people believed that the Democrats are not authentic. They talk.
No politician is authentic.
But then you get a moment and you've been talking about this man and he's an existential threat.
Phil Hemlich.
And he's an existential threat to democracy, and you get a chance to sit down to him and you don't bring it up at all?
You know,
keep it real
to your
at
point,
all times.
Nathan, I get what you're saying. I understand completely what you're saying, because the mindset that you're talking about when we're discussing this is something that my peers, this is a discussion that we have quite a bit. When I ask them, or at least when I was asking them during the election, where do you like, what are your thoughts? Where do you fall? That what you said about authenticity was a overarching point being made. I don't feel as if I don't want to vote for Donald Trump, but I also don't want to vote for a party that always seems to be like selling a dream. Always seems to be selling a dream, and then things don't work out, and then we don't hear from them again. We don't see them again. They don't come to our neighborhoods. They don't come to our communities. They don't put any more initiatives after they lose an election. Like, we don't see them after they lose. And so what's the point of them being in front of me anyway? That is the conversation that a lot of young voters are having. And to just throw this out there, I need y'all to understand that young voters are not as educated as older voters. We live in a time where we are not being taught, and at least we were not taught, and I can't even speak for people younger than me, but we were not taught government and politics. I believe the same way that some older generations were taught it. And so we go out and we are a lot more uninformed as voters than, our elders. And so, yes, things like authenticity matter. That is how we choose our leaders. We choose our leaders through more than just policy. Most of the time it ain't got nothing to do with policy. Most of the time it is, how do I feel about this person? What is the my first impression of this person? How do they build on that first impression? If I'm looking at a Donald Trump, he's a smooth talker, he's very confident, he seems to have a lot of backing by a lot of powerful people. Why wouldn't I align myself with that? Versus a Joe Biden who has shown to have some struggles when it comes to public speaking, who chose to not always remember his talking points when he's debating. Like, there is a loss of confidence with the Democratic Party and some of the candidates that they choose to put place out front, because there seems to be a lack of authenticity. But
Raven,
what comes with that is Democrats have to do a better job of educating their voter. We cannot take this stance where we are all holier than thou. We're too good to teach each other what's important. And that's the issue that I think that party is having. You've not figured out how to better educate your voter base, your young voter base, and connect with them. And so, yes, you're going to have situations where Charlamagne the God knows if he says on air, to Kevin Gordon's point, he can get on there and say stuff like, I don't know how I felt about Biden being cool and chummy with Trump. I feel some type of way about that. He knows
fake.
that if he says that, young voters are going to resonate with that, because we were expecting for the kind of candidate to stand on business, to be about what he said he was about. We're not expecting for somebody to just shake hands and call it a deuce and be out of here.
Now imagine Raven, imagine Kevin A, imagine everybody, imagine Biden had did that. I'm not saying you got to use bad language or get super disrespectful, but imagine in that moment last week, he said, look, I feel this way about you, this way about you, this way about you, and this way about. Imagine what the story would have been. Imagine how
I guarantee he would have only offended older voters. Young voters would have been right on program.
He would have looked.
They would have looked at Joe Biden a little bit differently. Like, oh, okay, he got a little something to him. That's what people want. That's what people like out of Trump.
Joe Biden is not running again ever.
I know, but
this is why I say it would have been meaningless, and it would have been a fleeting.
It would not have been meaningless.
It would have been a fleeting thing. I'll get to the one point.
Fleeting.
I'll get to Raven's main point, the one that really makes a difference about what she said, is that Democrats need to run better candidates.
What?
You need to run. It gets right down to that. It gets right down to that point, base and simple. No. Look, I'm a pragmatist. I've been around this long enough. I've been covering this stuff a long time, that if you are looking for an authentic candidate, you are deluding yourself, because there are few things that are authentic in a political campaign. So when you see Donald Trump working at McDonald's, or JD Vance dropping by a bakery, or Kamala Harris, do you actually think these people dropping in on a skyline, do you actually think these people live like that and do that every day? No, they don't. That's stuff that's set up by their campaign to make them look a certain way. There's nothing authentic about that. If you want, these are millionaires and billionaires. Okay, these are millionaires and billionaires who are running for office, who have very little in common with the people who vote for them. So if they were being their authentic self, Donald Trump would fill campaigns from his gold toilets in Trump Tower and all of these other. That's how he lives. Okay, that is what's authentic about who he is. So there's
Joe Biden,
this notion.
But Kevin, let me ask you a question.
Maybe I'm too cynical.
In those setups where you have these photo ops at these different places, all right, who looks more comfortable in those settings?
Huh?
I said, who looks more comfortable in those settings?
When he was cosplaying?
You don't think Donald Trump was very comfortable putting on that apron at McDonald's and working the line there and being with the people, as opposed to Biden going into and probably not even understanding where the hell he was, getting an ice cream cone, and Kamala Harris trying to relate to people. She can't relate to people. She didn't have the capability.
She was very relatable.
She was very relatable. Y'all tripping. She was very relatable.
Kamala Harris was very relatable.
Oh yeah.
Matters.
I've got a middle class background, and and I worked at McDonald's when I was in school, which was a lie.
This is why Democrats lose. This is why Democrats lose.
Exactly.
Why is that?
Because what I'm speaking on is pragmatism. Republicans are pragmatic. right? Democrats, oh, I got to feel a certain way. It's got to be in my emotions. I
No.
got to get this. I got to get that.
Exactly.
And that's why they lose, because they don't.
That's
all
not
of the
true.
stuff you guys are talking about don't matter.
Just like the transgender bills don't matter.
What swag somebody got, no standing on business, all of that has very little
All of
to
that
do
matters.
with what policy somebody is going to put forth that's going to change your life.
Exactly.
No, that doesn't matter.
That's why
Because I'm not
Democrats
offering
In the
you
grand
policy.
scheme of things, Kevin, I agree with you. Policy is always going to be what matters most, but to get a young voter in the door, you have and that's also, and it's just a side note, but that's also the issue that I feel like a lot of young people have with our elders. I'm here on the buzz all the time having conversations with my elders. I am the designated young person in the room. There's a lot of struggle that comes with that, because when we are trying to explain what actually matters to us and appeals to us as young people, you brush it off. That's not important enough to discuss, or that's not important enough to matter. It matters. These are the children that you raised. And so the children that you raised care about things like authenticity. They care about things like, what is the impression this person makes on me? Before we start talking policy, you have to introduce yourself to me. You have to make me understand who you are, so then I can now listen to what it is you're saying and what policies you intend to put in place. And if you just ignore that whole important part of it, I ain't gonna hear a word you saying. You ever try to talk to a child about something very important and you cannot get that child to focus or pay attention for the life of you, but you hand them a piece of candy, or you hand them something, or you say something like that will catch their attention, and you got their whole attention in the palm of your hand. Those are the children that you raised. Those are the voters that are now out here and making decisions about who is our world leader. You have to approach them that way, because that's how you raise them. We took the shortcut when we were raising kids to appeal to what appeals to them. And now we are out in the world, and you got a whole demographic of young people and young voters who operate through the world that way. What makes me feel good today? And I know at a certain point, it was a laughing matter where all these new kids are so sensitive. They're so emotional about everything because you raised us that way. And so we're going out into the world. And yes, emotions do matter. Things like how I feel about a candidate does matter. Yeah, you got some good policy over there, but how do you make me feel? Unfortunately, it matters. And so if you want young voters to really pick up the mantle, older Democrats and elder Democrats and or whoever, if you want young voters to pick up that mantle, you're gonna have to figure out what appeals to them. And that has been my main complaint the entire election. Young voters were not central to Democrats. We just were not. And then when you try to reach out to us, it was in the same way that your grandparents reach out to you. Hey, I heard your favorite rap. I heard about a rapper called Little Such and Such, and you don't know who they talking about, or you've never heard any of their music, but because they heard Little in front of the name, they think that's your favorite rapper. No, Grandma, I don't even know who that is. I don't listen to their music. What I listen to is A, B, C, and D. But because there's such a disconnect between the older and younger generations, we now no longer have a way to deliver important information to each other because we have not practiced communicating effectively for quite some time. So yes, I get what you're saying, Kevin A. I get it. I promise. Policy is always paramount. But in order to attract the kind of votership that you need, we're going to have to take some notes from the Republicans. They have got that down pat in a way that we need to figure out how we're going to do it next time around. Because if we don't, we're doomed. We're never going to see a Democratic presidency probably again. And I hate to say that, but if we don't figure it out quick, we may not ever get back to a space where the White House is ran on good policy and good policy alone. We will never see that again.
I hope you're wrong.
And I don't know if we ever even seen that, but policy,
I hope you're wrong.
I'd be curious to
continue to operate the way we are.
And maybe you can elaborate on this.
Go ahead,
I was going to say, maybe Raven can elaborate on this. I would love to know what Donald Trump did in his campaign that spoke to young people. If you're telling me selling gold sneakers is what I got to do to get young people attention, if I got
sneakers.
How about secure the border? How about making sure we stay out of foreign wars?
She just said that didn't have nothing to do with security.
How about making sure that we have a safe country in order to raise children and to have education? How about that?
Kevin, I'm just going off of what Raven said about young people. So she made it clear that policy was not the dividing.
It's not the first thing. It's not the first thing. What pulled a lot of young people in for Trump was the
Swag.
The swag and the entertainment of it all. And,
Yep.
and it sounds crazy. It sounds insane to
sounds
pick a president based off of how
ridiculous.
entertaining he is.
Define
But
swag.
that is what gets
Define
the foot
swag.
in the door. Unfortunately, we live in this time right now where if it ain't entertaining, I'm not paying attention to it. That is how we that is how we are in
swag.
general as consumers. If it ain't entertaining, if it don't give me some good feelings, if it don't give me something to like look forward to, I don't care about it. That is just consumers in general in America right now.
And that is the downfall.
Politically, we are
You are right, Kevin A. That is our downfall.
That's the downfall of our society, and this
You're
is
absolutely right.
that will be the end of America more than
Right
anything.
there.
The unseriousness, it needing to be entertained, and I agree with you 100% on that, Raven. And I see it in all capacities of our life. Whether we're talking about from the church, people want to come to church, they ain't coming to church unless they entertain.
Entertained.
They're not engaging in politics.
I don't want to hear about the news unless you make it
They're not going to
entertaining.
read the media.
Yeah.
They're not going to engage in media unless it's entertaining. And then you wonder why we have all of these problems. Is because we would rather be entertained than seriously consider. And I feel sad for young generations because the fact that they're not engaged. Look, I'm on the back nine of my life, as are most of us who are on this podcast. You know, y'all still got many holes left to play.
Taking my blood pressure medicine and everything, man.
And this country and the issues are what you guys are going to inherit. Most of us might be able to outlast it, but you guys won't. And I think that's the sad. That's
Kevin
the sad
A., will you give me this? Because I know we vehemently disagree on what Biden should have done in that meeting. Will you agree with me in the very least that if Biden had spoke his truth straight to Trump's face, it would have been at least been entertaining, right?
Well, no question about that. I mean, look,
I'll take that, bro. No more. I'll take that.
Define swag and entertainment. You had one campaign that talked about joy. You talked about we're joyous about this and we're enthused. And in order to do that, I'm going to entertain you with Beyonce, who, by the way, I'm going to pay millions of dollars to show up. I'm going to bring in Oprah, and I'm going to pay her $2.5 million.
None of those decisions were made based
her
on
production company. She did, yes,
as opposed to somebody that said, "Hey, you're a young person. The interest rate is way too high. You can't afford a house. The jobs are."
I've never heard Trump say that. Never, not once. I
Oh,
never
really?
heard him say that ever.
Oh, I see. So he wasn't talking about border security. He wasn't talking about non-involvement in foreign wars. He wasn't talking about the economy. He wasn't talking about
the economy was trash.
He wasn't talking what?
He said the economy was trash, but all of a sudden, I'm sure it's going to look a lot better on January 25th. Yes, he talked about that.
If you look around at the business community, you look at the stock market, and you talk about the consumer confidence numbers that have been coming out.
Way
you
up,
talk about people in the construction industry, people in the trucking industry. When you see a lot of these people talking about they're very optimistic about what they're going to be seeing in the coming years, I'd say that that's probably a good start.
Yeah, it's a savior model, right? Just because he is who he is, all of a sudden things are magically going to get better. But you brought up the border, and that's one of our topics for today. Well, apparently there is no southern border crisis because Donald Trump this past week had a telephone conversation with the president from Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, and afterward he went on True Social and declared victory. He said, look, now they're going to start working on in stopping immigration from the Mexico side. And the president of Mexico put this tweet out and said, basically, we had a conversation, but we did not close the border, and we're going to work on our relationship with the United States. But again, Trump and a lot of people in Trump world on Twitter, they're claiming has already solved the southern border crisis.
In that tweet you just put up, she said that these people are being assisted. Let me see. Mexico followed to address migration phenomenon, respecting human rights. Thanks to this, migrants and caravans are assisted before they reach the border. Who is assisting them? Why are they being allowed to go through Mexico? And why isn't Mexico saying, not going to happen. You're not coming through here. Who's assisting these people?
On the Mexico side?
Well, who's assisting these caravans that begin in Venezuela, that begin in Honduras, that begin? And if you're seeking asylum, generally, traditionally, asylum is the first safe country you come to. And why are they going through 3, 4, 5 countries? Why are people from China coming up through the southern border? Why are people from Iran coming up through the southern border?
I think the question is, why is Trump claiming that after one phone call, all of a sudden the southern border is secure? That's the real question.
Well, she is talking about closing it on her side because of the threat of terrorists.
That's what she
Just
exactly
like
is not
Justin
talking about.
Trudeau got on the phone and said, "Hey, Donald, we need to work this out."
Hold on. That's
And
not
if
what
you
she
guys
said.
aren't
Well,
concerned about the amount of fentanyl that is coming into this country, the next time they put up the Ohio State horseshoe and you see that there's 100,000 people in there watching a football game, you multiply that by 3, and that's the number of people that died based on because of fentanyl poisoning in this country. If that doesn't bother you, then you don't have a heart. And I don't know what else to say to you.
we all bothered by it, but let's read this last.
Then let's stop it.
Sentence.
I have a question
The last
about
sentence
this.
reads, "We reiterate that Mexico's position is not to close borders, but to build bridges between governments and between people." So the point I'm trying to make is Trump is lying once again.
But I have a
lying once
question about that tweet. Is that last line? Because the last line made me think: and I don't know, maybe it might have been lost in translation. But is she saying that people are being assisted back into Mexico, or is she saying that people are being assisted out of Mexico? Because if she's saying that the position is not to close borders.
Right. I don't know about that individual point. I think that's a fair question.
No, I think she's saying that they're doing everything on their end to stop these caravans before they reach the border. So that's what I think she's saying, is that their government is working on their side to make sure that the caravans don't even make it to the border.
And she also went out of her way to make the point that they're not doing anything different. Like Mexico, because they had a phone call with Trump, are not suddenly doing anything different this week that they were doing 2 weeks ago
what I got from
or
her
5 weeks ago.
For her, she's coming out. She's coming out and saying after he done said, "We done fixed everything. It's all fixed." He just was reiterating. She was just making it known that we not changed. We ain't changed a thing. So whatever he's talking about, it's got to be some stuff that he came up on his own, because that ain't what the conversation was. That's what I get from that tweet.
First of all, I think anybody. Let's just be fair. If you're a thinking person, nobody in their right mind is going to believe that because Donald Trump made one phone call suddenly and threatened tariffs, that suddenly the border is secure and everything's changed. If you really believe that and you fall for that, then that mental health services that we were talking about a little bit earlier, then that just makes my case for why government needs to fund that.
Well, it prompted a phone call with Justin Trudeau that said that he wanted to cooperate and wanted to work with the incoming administration to stop some of the flow of illegal immigrants and drugs into the United States.
I'm not saying that nothing good came from the call, but this is
if you don't think that a phone call changes things,
Trump over-exaggerates.
Why is Putin talking about a possible ceasefire? Why is Hezbollah talking about a ceasefire with Israel? Why is Iran now suddenly talking about that they want to?
Didn't Joe Biden negotiate that?
What?
Didn't Joe Biden negotiate that, Kevin?
Negotiate what?
The ceasefire.
With Hezbollah.
I believe that happened under the Biden administration.
It happened under the Biden administration, but because they were getting their butts kicked by Israel, and because they know that there was coming into power a president that was backing Israel, and there was a
sure. So you started out.
Hey, you know what?
We started out with the right piece. You started out with the right,
and that was organized by Iran, who realized that coming into this, they're going to have to play ball. Because if there are sanctions on them and they lose that money flow, they're not going to have the money in order to sponsor terrorism around the country with the Houthis, the Hezbollah, and Hamas.
Go ahead, Kevin.
There's a lot of speculation in there by Kevin Gordon. He started out with the first good point, which I would concede to him, that Israel has been kicking their butt, and they recognize that this is not a battle that they can win. And this is an opportunity for them to buy a respite to maybe rebuild and rearm before they get exterminated. You could have left it there, but you couldn't resist the temptation to try to give Donald Trump credit for something that he had absolutely no hand in, and you have no evidence of that. Neither does he. Like, this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about. That's exhibit A of just like what he's trying to do with this phone call. And I get, look, Donald Trump's your guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem that we have in this country is people want to do exactly like what you did, Kevin. They want to take speculation, zero evidence.
Why didn't this happen in the last 4 years? Why is it now suddenly happening, Kevin?
I don't know the answer to that, Kevin. I don't. We
had 4 years of this.
I don't know the answer to that, Kevin. I don't.
What? Hezbollah has been shooting rockets. Do you know how many missiles are fired into Israel on an annual basis?
No, how many?
Thousands of rockets.
Okay.
Coming from Hamas and Hezbollah. The entire northern part of Israel, there are between 50 and 100,000 residents are refugees within their own country because they've had to move away from there.
Okay.
And Israel is the size of New Jersey. Can you imagine New Jersey tolerating thousands of missiles being fired into that from New York, Connecticut, or any of the surrounding countries and putting up with that and not reacting to that?
Sounds terrible, but what is your point, though, Kevin G?
The point is this has been going on for a number of years, and suddenly Israel started fighting back after October the 7th and started taking action and started kicking butt and taking names. And the Biden administration has done nothing but say, Israel, you shouldn't go this far, you shouldn't do this. And now all of a sudden, in the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden, Hezbollah is interested in a ceasefire. Iran's UN ambassador has contacted Elon Musk and said,
this good
hey,
news?
is there something we can do to work this situation out?
Isn't this good news?
All of a sudden, this has happened in the last couple of weeks, and it's just a coincidence.
Kevin G, isn't this good news? I mean, give credit where credit is due. It happened under Biden. It is what it is.
Kevin's putting forth more false information. He said that the Biden administration hasn't done anything short of sending weapons, sort of sending money to Israel. That's not doing anything. And I think counseling a friend on the notion of, hey, you don't want to make the same mistakes that we made when we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan in a war that likely you're going to be perpetuating for a long time, losing casualties. I think that's good friendship, trying to give somebody that type of advice to not repeat the same mistake that I did. I don't think that all the while I'm backing you, saying you have the right to exist and giving you weapons and money. That's not doing anything, Kevin.
You mean the Biden administration didn't say that they were going to withhold sending weapons or certain weapons to Israel?
They didn't allow humanitarian aid. Wasn't that the caveat? Wasn't that related to allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza?
Well, who is and where is that humanitarian aid coming from?
Well,
it's certainly not coming from Hamas. It's not coming from the Arab countries. We spent what did we spend? $250 million on that boondoggle of a wharf that was supposed to bring aid to Hamas, and it got destroyed by waves and stuff like that. That was a failure on the Biden administration. And the fact that Hamas has gotten defanged and a lot of their leaders have been killed by Israel, all of a sudden now they're willing to speak up because they realize that an incoming administration is going to be much tougher on them than the current administration.
Kevin, I told you, there are people out there that believe. They really believe it. They believe that Trump can move mountains just by making a phone call. They have bought.
Well, there were people that believed that Obama could move mountains, and he got the Nobel Peace Prize before he did a damn thing. So you tell me.
Well, he didn't just do a damn thing. I mean,
he didn't do anything. He got the Peace Prize before he even became president.
Obama
and then he started
killed
2 wars, 3 wars?
Hey, I had a problem with all of that, but that's a separate issue. Obama killed more people with drone strikes.
Yeah.
And then he got the Nobel Peace Prize.
But he was the Messiah, Nathan.
That has no relevancy in what we're talking about here at all.
Yeah. But no, hope and change. That was, Nobel Peace Prize for coming into office before you do anything. And he got credit for all this. He was going to move mountains. The seas were going to stop rising. We're going to.
You're just mad because Trump hasn't earned it.
Trump's got a 4-year track record of what happened during his administration. So I think people kind of have an idea.
Yeah,
he does. He does have a track.
Oh, so you guys don't want you and I can agree on lower gas prices. I get it. Okay.
And listen, let's wrap up, everybody. I know Raven and folks, I really appreciate your time. Everybody is super busy. We've had a really passionate conversation.
And I got more turkey to eat.
And I just want to, just for 5 minutes or so, a couple of minutes, I mean, Does anybody have anything that they want to say? Maybe you didn't get a chance to make a point or somebody said something. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I wanted to actually circle back to the one of the first things that we talked about when it comes to a city council allocating this money for trans youth mental health support. Because I was listening to everybody talk, and then we kind of ventured off into something completely different. We started talking about bathrooms and stuff, and it just became a whole different thing. But before I could add my 2 cents,
Okay.
I wanted to
Sorry
kind
about
of
that.
share my thoughts. I am still I can say that I am still learning the full function of city council. I am somebody who I just have kind of come into politics in the last maybe 5-6 years and truly understanding it. I have had to kind of play catch up, and that's why I love being here at the Buzz, because my elders, they teach me things. And so I have just started to really understand the true function of city council. And when it comes to this particular issue, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about city council allocating that large sum of money to that what feels like a very niche issue. And it might not be very niche, because I know Cincinnati is very liberal and we do a lot to support the LGBTQ community in the city. I understand that. But it does feel very niche when on this here radio station for the last couple of years, we've been talking about Black children in general who just need mental health support that they are not getting. We're watching our Black youth kill each other and commit crime and do all these different things that when we sit back and we have the conversation about it, the first thing that a lot of people say is, outside of parenting, is these kids need mental health support. Why was that not the first initiative? That is an immediate problem. I feel like we see there's so many different stories that come across my desk and Lincoln Ware's desk and anybody else who does media in Cincinnati that's included in your show prep for today is probably going to be a story about some Black youth either committing a crime or being killed in the midst of a crime or something like that. So why is that? It was also part of the reason why a lot of people took issue with Mika Owens' pick of Evan Nolan over in Ozzie Davis. Mr. Ozzie is who we call Mr. Avondale here in Cincinnati, and he's also very involved with the youth. He was somebody who I would have loved to see take that seat, because I felt like he would have been very effective in dealing with the issues that we are finding with Black youth in Cincinnati and the things that we're seeing in the news. Why wasn't Black youth, if we're gonna throw a bunch of money behind a niche cause, why not let it be Black youth and how to support them both on a mental health standpoint, but also getting these kids off the streets when they are roaming around after school hours? Why wasn't Miss Iris been down there at the square trying to figure out how to facilitate these kids between school time and getting them home for a while now? Why wasn't Miss Iris hit up and asked, well, how can we support you financially with your cause, with your effort in trying to make sure Black youth are safe and also not committing crimes, while we're trying to usher them away from the square and all these different things that we keep hearing here and there in the news? Why wasn't that the first thing that got some money thrown at it? That was kind of my take. Like, I get that the trans youth need to be supported, and I don't have no qualms with that. But I do think that there are things that more immediately affect the overall public than that. If I'm just being honest, I think
That's
that
it's
what
a
we're seeing with Black
fantastic
youth
point,
is
and
a
I
lot
agree with
more.
what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. But I would also take this a little bit further, and I would say, all right, at some point in time, this situation in the Black community or in all of Cincinnati has started to devolve. Who's been in charge all this time period, and it's got to this position? And you're telling me that the people that keep getting elected aren't aware of the situation? And now these are the people that you want to solve the problem, when in fact they're probably the people that created the problem in the first place. That's the only thing that I would ask, and that maybe there should be some sort of a revitalization of the city saying, here is what our priority should be, and let's meet these first before we figure out or invent other ways to spend and waste people's money.
Can we be fair though? Can we be fair real quick? And I think that was an excellent point from Raven, but we were just talking about one bullet point, like in terms of the new spending and the programs the city council voted on. there were a lot of the things that Raven talked about that were addressed. There's a lot of city money, taxpayer money that go to programs that address those things you brought up. We just didn't talk about them because the transgender thing was just hot in the news.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see my friend Phil Heimlich, and I'm sure he's smiling on the inside, even though he's
Yes,
even though
Phil's face is hilarious.
No, he's filling out his registration card to switch parties. Did you see him writing?
Yeah. I'm filling it out because, I have this old-fashioned idea that I'm like Ronald Reagan. We stand up to dictators. We have free trade. We balance the budget. I'm old-fashioned. I'm
Fair trade, not free trade.
I'm a dinosaur. I'm like a Ronald Reagan dinosaur. I'm
No,
a
you're
dinosaur
not.
Republican.
You're not even close, Phil. Sorry.
Hey, as Raven was talking, all I could think of was the refrain that our good friend Phil says all the time is sort of, where does it end, right? Like if we spend money on this, where does it end? And Raven sort of, I don't think that was her intention, but I felt him smiling on the inside as she was talking, saying, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about, because to borrow a phrase of identity politics, for every identity that you try to pull money out of the city budget for, there's going to be another one that says, what about us and where does it end? And I think, and that's why I said in my initial comments that I think what we have to do a better job is getting out of talking about groups and talking about issues and making sure that these issues are adequately resourced to where everybody can access them, right? Again, mental health, as Raven said, is not exclusive to the LGBTQ or the Black community or the white community. It is an issue across the board.
Yeah.
So if the city is going to fund it, we don't need to call out a particular group. We need to say, hey, because we represent the entirety of the city, right? We want to make sure that all of our residents have access to this. And now it becomes a question of how do we make sure that those groups that we feel like really need it, make sure that they know about it and can take advantage of it, and that only those who are astute enough to watch council meetings or read the newspaper or whatever know about this funding that's available. I think when we start trying to say, hey, we're doing this for this specific group, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think per se, I understand where it's coming from at a heart level. But what I'm saying is, this is something that affects the entirety of your city, and you represent everybody. So let's make sure that we've got enough to serve everybody, and that the targeted groups that we feel like need it, make sure that they know about it, and we make sure we're getting them to the table so that they can take advantage of it. But it's not just for them.
Yeah, but I don't understand how you do that. Like, I don't understand what your point is. Like, so for instance, city council has come to their attention that transgender youth are under a lot of pressure. They got high numbers of suicide and all kind of other issues. How are they supposed to address that without saying that we want to help transgender youth? I don't understand.
But there aren't high issues of mental health and trauma with Black kids who live, to Raven's point, who live.
Yeah, but I think it's wrong to do that. So now you're pitting two groups against one another.
No, they're pitting groups against each other by calling out a group. What I'm saying
who is they?
It's
city council.
City council, absolutely. I'm saying is
addressing issues that are particular.
Nathan, do you agree that there are needs across the board?
Well, yeah, but is that a serious question? Of course I do.
Okay, so
then
what's wrong with saying?
Hey guys, I hate to say this, but I've got a phone call that's going to be coming in here very shortly, so I'm going to have to bug out here, and we'll talk to you all next week. Okay, everybody have a great week, and be safe out there.
Good seeing you. So what's wrong with saying, hey, we're going to allocate $1 million for mental health services, and all of those who are in need, whether you're Black, LGBTQ, or whatever, come and take advantage of these services. And then if I want to make sure that LGBTQ people or Black people take advantage of that, then I can have targeted campaigns that go to them and say, hey, here are the dollars that are available. come take advantage of
That's what
this.
they
But
did.
you're not saying that these are dollars we're setting aside specifically for this.
That's
Can I?
wait.
So can
That's a
I explain?
mischaracterization. Well,
Can I
that's
explain? Can I?
that's a
Can I
mischaracterization.
explain
Hold
what
on,
I
hold on one
think that
second,
is
Raven.
being?
That's a mischaracterization. So everybody knows if you have a nonprofit, you can go to city council, and if city council has funds available, you can apply. Put together, your spiel and say, look, I got a program, and in my program, these are the people that we're going to help. That's what they did. That's all they did. City council didn't say, we got $500,000 specifically for transgender. They said, we got money. And it just so happens that they're going to give $500,000 to these particular groups.
Okay.
I just wanted to interject real fast and say that I think that what I get what Kevin is saying. If the intention is to address that specific group, why not just include everybody in one go round? So if you have this $500,000 to give away for the cause of supporting mental health, why not then split that 500K up and allocate it to whatever available mental health services? They could be niche services, but everybody's getting touched. Everybody's getting touched with that money.
That's what
So
happens.
if I have 500K, then the supporting trans youth is getting touched. Supporting there are plenty of organizations that I know for a fact support Black youth specifically. There are plenty of organizations that support youth in general. Like, why not spread that money between all of those different niche organizations so
Raven,
that everybody can benefit
But
from?
Raven, that's the way it works. If you start a nonprofit right now that say you want to benefit Black kids with mental health, you put your program together, right? Next year, when the budget comes up and the city's looking to allocate funds, they say, look, we got $3 million. Put in your proposal. If you put in your proposal and city council looks at it and the majority says this is worthy, then you'll get the funding. That's how it works. They're not saying we got
So
money
then the
only
choice
for
is made.
transgenders.
But are we? So then are we saying that we know for a fact that a black organization didn't make that same plea, didn't come with the same ask?
I don't know that, but I do know there was at least one black or organization that was focusing on Black people. It was out of the state. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, and they got $250,000. So yeah, that's just the way the process works. If you've got a proposal for a nonprofit, then you put it before city council. They'll look at it.
Because then what I'm hearing is we just not asking for enough. That's what I'm hearing.
We're not asking for enough, and we don't know where the money's already gone. I mean, it's been reported. We're just talking about this because it's got the word transgender in it, and that's a hot button topic right now. But there were plenty of organizations that are going to benefit Black people and homeless people and other people that got money from the city. This just happens to be another piece of that money.
Okay.
I had a problem with Kevin Gordon telling Phil Hemlich that he's not a Republican, but he left before I could get to him. And I want to get to the bottom of that. Like, just because you disagree about Trump, that means you're not a member of the party. That seems whack to me.
Well, I kind of would describe myself, if I may, as a Liz Cheney Republican or an Adam Kinzinger Republican who I got to know a lot when I last ran for Congress. And I don't think anyone would characterize either of them as Democrats or liberals because they are across the board conservatives. They just cannot abide someone who is so dishonest and so corrupt as Donald Trump. And I'm with them. And I see, frankly, as I kind of started to say a few minutes ago, I think I'm more of a traditional Republican than Donald Trump is, or with all the respect for my friend Kevin Gordon, who I'd say if he was here. Somehow the Republican Party has slowly, like the frog in the boiling in the water that keeps turning up, has slowly adopted its positions to match Donald Trump. It's like the old Ronald Reagan expression about Democrats. I didn't leave the party, they left me. We used to be the free trade party. We used to be the party that believed in balanced budgets. And by the way, Donald Trump added more to the deficit than any president in history. We were the country that stood up for democracies that were attacked by dictatorships. Can you imagine Ronald Reagan saying, yeah, go ahead and take Ukraine. What do I care? So I will respectfully say to my friend Kevin Gordon and others that I think I'm very much a traditional conservative Republican. I just will not support a guy who's a con man and a crook.
I have no problem with that. All right,
Yeah,
guys.
I think unfortunately, Nathan, that's what, at least on the Republican side of things, and maybe even to some degree on the extremes of the Democratic side, that it's almost like, hey, if you are not 100% in for this thing, then you're not a part of it. And I think that's just a dangerous place to be, because I think that look, our country is changing in a lot of different ways. And I think there are elements of this country that are not ready for that change, are resistant to that change, and are pushing back against that change. And then I think there are other elements of the country that want things to change very rapidly. Like, hey, these are good ideas and let's make them happen like right now. And I also think that there are parts of the country that are not ready for that either. And so I think what is incumbent upon us, if we're going to move forward and have any progress, are folks who consider themselves that rational middle, that pragmatic middle, who can see that we need to change, but how we change matters, and the way that change looks like matters, and there needs to be conversation and common ground and understanding about how do we get to that change. Like those are the ones who are going to make sure that we don't wind up running off the rails in one direction or the other in unhealthy ways. And when people try to force you into a box, sometimes like what Kevin does in saying that, hey, you're not a Republican. The Republican Party needs voices like Phil Hemlich's as much as the Democratic Party needs voices like Joe Manchin's and some of the others that irritate liberals when they say, hey, slow down for a minute. The rest of the country is not where you are right here on this, and I'm not going to support that. Those voices are critically important to the conversation. I think those are going to be the ones that kind of help us make progress. It's never going to be as fast as a lot of us want, and it's certainly not going to be as slow as people who want to go backwards want it to be. So hang in there. I say all that to say, hang in there.
Thank you. I needed that boost of encouragement. Thank you, Kevin. I did.
The only other issue I would have is with Kevin Aldridge, who said that Democrats need to run better candidates. And I feel like you were talking about Kamala, and I don't think that she was a bad candidate. I do think there was some messaging lessons that sometimes you can only learn certain lessons when you lose. So looking back, I think there's some things that the Republicans do, and I don't think it's good for our country, that the Democrats don't do enough of. And I think if they start doing this thing, it ain't good for us. It's not good for our democracy, but it would be better for them in terms of like winning national elections. So I'm just looking at the electorate. It's done change, and they're looking for something different. And, Trump, and he gives them that. And what that is, what Trump and the Republicans are very good at is giving people villains to focus on. So whether it be the left, whether it be the media, whether it be immigrants, whether it be George Soros, they're really, really good at that. And, when Republicans talk about what the problems are, they always follow up with a person or a name that you can blame. Like it or not, it's just something about the human psyche that's very, very basic. And I just don't hear that enough or see it enough from the Democrat Party. If people aren't making enough wages, whose fault is it? Who do I blame? Who can I focus on? Trump makes it very simple. The Republicans make it very, very, very simple. And I think it resonates with people.
It does. Well, I think the worst phrase for Democrats probably in the last decade, and I think it was through no fault of her own, was when Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. And I think that in essence, while I agree with that 100%, in politics, that don't work, because one of the things that is negative campaigning is effective.
Exactly.
Sherrod Brown is no longer in office because they ran those campaign commercials on him non-stop, 24 hours a day.
Every time you turn on the football game.
And it was effective.
Yes, it was.
And so I think as much as Democrats want to take this, hey, I want to take the high road and, we're above all of that. No, That you got to participate in that. That's got to be a part of, and whether that's the candidate themselves, or whether or not you utilize your PACs to do that work, to political action committees to do that work for you. If you want to keep yourself as a candidate separate from that, you have to do that. I mean, when Trump lost in 2020, the Lincoln Project, you got to remember all of the advertising and things that they did, the anti-Trump campaigning that they did around Donald Trump was incredibly effective, on top of a lot of other things. So I think that when I say Democrats run bad candidates, maybe that was inarticulate. Getting back to what Raven was saying, they need to run more inspiring candidates. They need to run more candidates that get people excited. It's a very objective thing. Clearly, the vote totals tell you what you need to say. The vote totals are not objective. The statement may be objective, but what you can't argue with is the voter turnout and what people did. I personally, and I've said this, when Kamala Harris ran the first time, I didn't think she was a good candidate. I've said many times, and will say it again, that if there had been a Democratic primary process that had been able to be conducted prior to this election, she would not have emerged as the Democratic candidate this go around. She was the fortunate beneficiary of a set of circumstances. And I don't have any evidence to support that. That's
but totally, I do. I've got evidence to support it.
That's totally my opinion.
But my evidence.
I go by the fact that last time she ran, she didn't even make it out of Iowa. So
yeah, this was just such a different type of election. Like, first time you had an incumbent president who lost, who ran again. First time you had an incumbent president who stepped down 3 months before the election. I mean, this was so different. I don't think the only way a candidate could have been better is if it was a white male. That's the only way it would have been better.
I'm not suggesting that she did anything wrong in the time that she ran. I'm saying that if take the special circumstances out of this.
But I don't think we can, though, Kevin. I don't think it's fair to have this conversation without talking about those circumstances.
No, I've said many times that Kamala Harris did about as good as anybody could have done with the hands that she was dealt in this situation. What I'm saying is, I think if she had a year and other Democratic candidates had been, you yourself just said it. You think the only way somebody could have done it was if it would have been a white male. My contention is I don't believe that in a more robust field of Democratic candidates that had a year to campaign, that she would have emerged as the Democratic nominee. I personally don't believe that. I don't believe she would have.
I think she's the sitting vice president, right? She's a sitting vice president. I think it would have been a really bad.
She's a sitting vice president that many people. She's a sitting vice president that many people see as Joe Biden keeping a campaign promise, or as the Republicans said, a DEI hire. And if you think that just Republicans think that, you are firmly mistaken.
No, I agree with you. There's a lot of people that believe that, man. It's just a great conversation to have. It's just so many different ways. Nobody's right or wrong. It's all just opinions. But right. I think that, again, the only way she could have been a better candidate is if she was a white male. If she was a white male who had some charisma about himself and had the exact same policy, said the exact same thing, people would have perceived it and felt it differently. And that's just a commentary on race and gender, which is out of her hands.
I'll see you that argument and raise you one more. I think if Tim Walz would have came out, if this process would have gone in a different way, where, like you said, we'd have had that year prior of campaigning, if Tim Walz would have threw his hat in the ring, I think he would have most definitely come out on top of Kamala Harris. I think that he would have. I actually think that people would have been more confident in voting for a Tim Walz as our next president over a Kamala Harris, because I think that when he first touched down and she was picked, people really liked who he was. He also had that appeal about him that was entertaining. He had a little bit of charisma that people could get if we had more time to get to know him, and he was very openly emotional and very openly excited about being chosen. I think if people had had more time to get to know him, he would have won that election. He would have had a better chance of winning the election. I do believe that.
And I just want to respond just to clarify a point because I saw our good friend and sister T. Nicole had commented in the comments about Kamala Harris. She said, "Whoa, all her talent and skills to be reduced to a DEI candidate." I'm not saying that I think Kamala Harris was a DEI candidate. I'm saying what's out there, what the perception is,
for sure.
not just in Republican circles, but in Democratic circles, based on the fact that Joe Biden made such a public proclamation about making her the vice president and the first Black woman. It may not have hit me that way, may not have hit a lot of people who listen to this that way, but there are people who look at that and say she didn't earn it. She didn't get it. She was given that, and she would not have, earned that otherwise if it would have been up to a vote of the people. And, that's just kind of where it is. I mean, like it or not like it, that's what's in the atmosphere.
No, you're right. You're right about that. I mean, I hear more of that from like the Republican side of things, but yeah, I think you'll hear some of that on the Democrat side, or maybe independents or people who are, not usual voters. Yeah, they may have that, but again, it goes back to race and gender, in my opinion, because I mean, clearly, if you look at a resume, the woman was qualified. But again, I think I'll just leave it at that. So, anything else before you roll out of here, guys? Phil, any thoughts? Yeah, because Kevin left. We all had beef with Kevin, and he got out of here quick.
I'll throw three very quick points out, but I'll make them real quick because I have to jump off like the rest of you on different issues. One, just jumping back quickly to the thing about Biden and what he should have said to Trump. I would just say when you invite someone to the White House for the purpose of working on to transition, I think to turn around in front of the cameras and sort of tell them what you don't like about him and disagree with him, I think is just plain rude. In my opinion, I will again say I think he showed a lot of class in not doing that. Secondly, Iran came up. I'm just going to remind people that Barack Obama has an outstanding deal with Iran where we can go in every year and inspect all their facilities. And Trump, because he saw it on Fox News, pulled us out of that. And since then, Iran has become much more of an enemy, has built up their nuclear weapons, which they were not doing. They abided by that treaty. Finally, and again, Kevin's not here about the Israel thing. Two things can be true at the same time. There was genocide committed, of course, by Hamas, terrible genocide. But Israel, in my humble opinion, has also committed genocide. They have killed over 40,000 Palestinians. And and everybody jumped up when Netanyahu was indicted by the criminal court. Well, frankly, I think he deserved it because, they needed to kill off Hamas, but killing over 40,000 Palestinian civilians, I think, goes well beyond anything that they should have done. That's my piece for today.
What he said, I'm with you 1,000% on that. Well, listen, everyone in the comment section, we went a bit longer than we usually do. Thank you so much for just taking a little bit of time on your Fridays, the beginning of the weekend, the day after the holiday known as Thanksgiving. So I really appreciate you spending some time with us. Please lift us up. We're still a very young, we're a baby in terms of podcast years, right? Just to your help, you sharing us, telling people about the podcast when we come on 1 p.m. on Tuesdays and also Fridays. It goes a long way. So thank you so much. And then thank you to the crew members. Raven, really appreciate you. Phil, really appreciate you. Kevin, you already know, bro. All great flows. Kevin G, wherever you are, great flows as I put them. And have a great rest of your Friday and your weekend.